Jaehaerys called the Great Council to prevent a war being fought over his succession. For he knew the cold truth. The only thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon was itself.
Mount your dragons and draw your swords. It's Game of Microphones. With Sir Duncan the Fearsome.
Well met, raging dragon riders and vengeful heirs, and welcome to Game of Microphones. I'm Lord Sterling, Sir Duncan the Fearsome, castrator of captured criminals and knower of nothing.
And I'm Lord Zach, Maester of Mayhem.
Welcome to episode 121. Sadly, as much as Lady Rachel would love to be here with us, scheduling conflicts are interfering with our ability to make it happen at this particular moment. I promise, however, that I'll do my best to get her on here as much as possible. But for now, as they say, the show must go on. What do we have in store today, Lord Zach?
On this episode, we're covering the pilot, the long-anticipated first episode of the new Game of Thrones prequel series, House of the Dragon. Season 1, Episode 1, The Heirs of the Dragon.
And in case you're not already aware, this podcast is from the perspective of someone who's current on the show. That means you've seen all previously aired episodes of Game of Thrones and the House of the Dragon pilot. And if not, there's still time to be savagely murdered in a brutal hand-to-hand combat after thinking you've just won a tourney joust, so you don't have to hear these spoilers.
Warning.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
I'd like to take a minute to apologize to our loyal, longtime listeners for our absence as of late. We'd had big plans when Game of Thrones Season 8 ended to begin covering the A Song of Ice and Fire books, but a number of factors prevented us from being able to do so, not the least of which was funding. I've been operating this podcast at a significant personal deficit throughout its run. Then, before Season 8, I had joined a new podcast network who made lofty promises, but they ended up failing to live up to any of their contractual obligations, including providing sponsors to the show, which left us hanging completely in the wind with no support at the last minute. Although I advertised for people for free during Season 8 because I loved their products, we had no paying sponsors and only a few but highly appreciated Patreon supporters and donors. As of now, we're starting over with no sponsors or income, so I'm forced to issue a call to our listeners to please support us if you're able to do so. Research and production for this show takes significant time and effort. We are relying solely on you to keep this going, and even if it's joining our Patreon for only a few bucks a month, anything you're able to give will help towards keeping this show alive. I implore you to consider helping to support Game of Microphones. I'm going out on a limb here, but only because it's critical for the survival of the show. If you'd like to donate or subscribe to support us, you can go to paypal.me/GOMpodcast or patreon.com/GOMpodcast. Thanks for your consideration. All right, let's begin. In consideration of further spoiler avoidance, we understand that most listeners have likely not read Fire and Blood, which covers this period of the Targaryen reign. Therefore, we will only be discussing events from the Dance of Dragons that have already come to pass on House of the Dragon, and will take caution not to spoil drama that is still to come on the show. Without any further ado, let's get into our top 5 highlights of House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 1, The Heirs of the Dragon. What's your number 1, Zach?
Okay, so my number 1 is... It's in the title. Dragons, baby.
That's mine also.
The dragons.
Nice. We're on the same page.
Cyrax, Caraxes, I mean, very different looking dragons. You know, I think George insisted that they give the dragons even more color and just, you know, differentiation for the new show. And we didn't see Caraxes almost until the very end with that black red, and he's like super long and elongated. And I mean, his feet, I think, have some kind of little like winglets, you know, kind of on the back, maybe to help his aerodynamics or whatever. But he was really cool. And Cyrax
Super
at the
cool.
very beginning, starting the episode, you know, after the prologue, seeing Cyrax, the shape of his body and, you know, his size, you know, was more like, you know, Drogon and Viserion from the first show. But his you know, his horns, or I don't know if he had like 2 sets on both sides. Really cool. And obviously, you know, I expect there to be a lot more dragon riding, dragon fights, dragon everything going forward. So really excited about the dragons.
Super excited. Man, that intro was epic as Cyrax comes rushing onto the screen from stage right, I guess you would say, flying through the clouds. And as they soar past the Red Keep, we get hints of the original Game of Thrones theme, dun, 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 just hints of it coming through the score, which was awesome. And at this moment, also, I think this is our first time seeing the legendary Dragon Pit in all its full glory, right?
Yeah, it was destroyed later in history between now where we're at and when the original show starts after Robert Baratheon is already the king. You know, it's been long destroyed. So seeing it, you know, on the top, I think it's listeners let us know. I think it's Visenya's hill where the dragon pit sits in King's Landing. There, it may be on a different hill, but anyway.
Yeah, one of those hills. Maybe we'll get to see how the destruction came to be in this series. But yeah, it looks absolutely gargantuan. I mean, that is like the biggest thing in King's Landing as far as I could tell. How do you think it compares in size to the Red Keep? I mean, the Red Keep's taller, but it's like giant.
Right. And the Red Keep kind of sticks, you know, it kind of juts out on a little, you know, type of peninsula next to the Blackwater Bay there.
Yeah.
But it houses dragons, like many dragons.
Yeah. It's like freaking Astrodome or something in the middle of Westeros.
I'm looking at the Wiki of Ice and Fire now. So the Dragon Pit is a huge dome castle, the crown of Rainey's Hill.
Nice.
So there you go. Our first correction. At least I caught it myself. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, really cool. And so she comes landing down into the lobby, I guess, at the Dragon Pit area, the atrium area, and the dragon trainers come out to meet Cyrax, and they start speaking in High Valerian. And the first guy says, "Dohairas, Cyrax," and you may remember another form of this word from the Faceless Men's famed call and response in Fancy Pants High Valerian. Valar Morgulis, all men must die. And then the reply,
Valar Dohaires,
all men must serve. So I did a little research on the language here, and it turns out that Dohairas is a conjugation of the High Valyrian infinitive verb dohairagan, meaning to serve. And if you want to get real technical, and I kind of want to nerd out here for a moment, Dohairas is the second person singular active present imperative form of the verb. In other words, it's a command, meaning serve. And then, so the guy says serve, and then he says umbas, and umbas comes from the High Valyrian infinitive verb umbagan, which means to stay, to wait. It's also a second person singular active present imperative command form, meaning wait. And then he says ribas, which is also a command from the infinitive ribagon, meaning to hear or alternately to obey, which makes more sense in this context. Thus, ribas means obey. So in order, they tell the Cyrax, serve, Cyrax, wait, obey. And luckily for them, he does. Because as Viserys says later, they don't really control the dragons. That's an illusion.
Right. Yeah. They, and they see, even it was like a trainee um, dragon pit servant, the dragon keeper. And then there was an experienced guy, and he had that long, bow staff. It was longer than a bow staff, but that long, almost
Oh
spear.
yeah,
And it was
as
like,
if that'll
nope,
do anything.
don't get right. Yeah, you'd poke him with it. The all the people in Marine learned that when Danny escaped from the pit there.
Right.
But they stopped him. He's like, "Oh, don't get any closer than that." And so that it kind of shows you that they're just there to guide the dragon. They're not. They obviously they can't be controlled. So it's like just depends on the dragon's mood that
They're
day.
doing the best they can.
Compliant. Yep.
Yeah, and it's at this point when we see the actor Graham McTavish come in, who is playing Sir Harold Westerling, one of the Kingsguard, I believe, and he's kind of the protector of Rhaenyra. And this was really cool to see because I like this actor. He was really awesome in the show Lucifer, which is a really great show. I recommend it. He plays a priest who ends up becoming I don't want to say, actually, it's kind of spoilery, but this is great casting all throughout the show. So this was really cool. And then in the background, as she's kind of chatting with Westerling here, the dragon trainer says, Dohairas Nayot. And this one was an exciting one to translate because during the process of translating this one, I realized we've heard this one before as well. And it's from one of the most epic lines in all of Game of Thrones at the moment when Daenerys takes the whip from the slaver, taking command of the Unsullied. It means forward. And it's that moment where she holds the whip and says, Novakeris, Nayot Memebatas, and it means Unsullied, forward march. And and she's demonstrating her new control over the soldiers. And that's right before she says Dracarys and commands Drogon to inflame the slaver guy, which was really cool. So the next moment we see the dragon action is at the funeral scene, and we get to see Syrax in action here. This was a really sad scene. We get the reveal that that Balon, the baby boy, has sadly passed, and Viserys is just distraught. And since Valerian is dead at this point, unfortunately, it comes down to Rhaenyra to command the dragon, her dragon, to set the pyre on fire. And we get to see some interesting interactions here between Daemon and Rhaenyra. I'm getting used to these names. Sorry, guys. And I thought it was interesting because Rhaenyra says in High Valerian, I wonder if during those few hours my brother lived, if my father finally found happiness. And to me, it kind of had like a sort of sarcastic tinge that indicated she may be angry at her father for sacrificing her mother for a baby who ended up basically being stillborn anyway. But Daemon sticks up for the father and tells her, your father needs you more now than he ever has, and gives her strength and advises her not to be mad at him, it seemed like to me. Although she lamented that she'll no matter what she does, I will never be a son.
Right. Yeah. Very, very powerful scene. And that it shows Daemon's more human side. I mean, in the beginning with the gold cloaks and all, we saw, how brutal he could be and his ambition with the small council and all that stuff. But, that really showed how much he cares for Rhaenyra, and how, kind and compassionate he can be when he chooses to be. He's not just, a Joffrey or a Ramsay Bolton, kind of a person. He's, going to have a lot of layers and a lot of complex emotions and shortfalls and that kind of thing. So it's going to be a very, very cool character to watch.
Definitely. And we get a couple moments like that in this episode. We'll get back to another one later on. But while we're on the subject of dragons, you mentioned Caraxes, Daemon's dragon. We get to see that a little later on. And like you said, he's elongated, red and black, flying through the sky, red black rocket, and he's called the Bloodworm, is what the nickname of him is, because of his long ass body. And like you mentioned, he's got the extra winglets on his back legs that help him aerodynamically, because his wings are off his shoulders, his front wings, and his body just extends so far backward that it's like tail wings on a plane, basically. You know about that.
Right. And if so the lift that is created from his wings, is so far forward on his body, in a normal wing position for a dragon, if you have too much, weight with his body and his tail going way backwards, like he would fly, like a pool noodle, and his tail would just like slope down and just droop down. But if you put something, on his back legs or whatever, or even on sometimes their tail kind of has a little, it widens out a little bit just to give it some aerodynamic, airflow, and create some lift on the tail section of his body, to where his whole body will kind of fly, together instead of, falling, Buzz Lightyear falling with style.
Yeah, pretty good. Good design on the part of the creators here. And so moving on from Caraxes, we do get to see also the skull of Valerian, the Black Dread, which was epic. Oh man, that was so
really
cool.
Awesome. Really. I mean, they have it, in a shrine, but down there, we kind of see that, back in the darkness, when Lena Headey's character, when Cersei, goes down to the, catacombs or whatever in the main show.
It was sitting on the ground level for that scene too.
Right.
Now they've got it up on a plinth.
Right. It's like on display, and you can tell how
the reverence
and just in awe of his life. And like they say in the show, he was the last living creature to see old Valyria in its strength. Man. So it's pretty crazy.
He was probably the oldest creature on Earth at that point, except for maybe Melisandre.
Yeah, I did hear that. Somebody supposed that, it's 172 years before Daenerys Targaryen. But it's like, I mean, we know Melisandre is pretty old.
Yeah, keep your eyes out. We could get a Melisandre cameo, theoretically, although it's probably unlikely, considering she's probably still a slave or something at this point. And who knows? Vhagar is still alive. That's Visenya's dragon, I believe, and the Aegon's one of his two sister wives, the Conqueror. So the lady, the Targaryen who originally wielded Dark Sister, well, not originally, but who had first wielded it over here after the conquest, because it's an ancient sword from Valyria, I believe. But yeah, maybe we'll see Vhagar. He's out there. Somebody's gonna have him. I bet he shows up sometime pretty soon. All right, let's move on to, I will give my number 2, which is the throne room. And man, the throne room is looking way different than it did in Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah, Robert Baratheon had flowers and florals going up the columns and stuff, but not so much now.
Yeah, he had sort of, at some point after, by the time of the Mad King, they had all the dragon skulls lined up in the throne room, going from large to small, and here we get to see that not only is the throne itself larger than it was in Game of Thrones, it's substantially larger, and it's asymmetrical, which is, it looks like it was directly based off of the illustration by Mark Simonetti from the World of Ice and Fire book, with the way it kind of flares off to the left as you're looking at it from the front. But not only is that really cool, the whole throne area is just like, wow, like a field of spikes with additional swords that I guess there were just too many for the throne, so they decided to fill the whole area with them, and it looks terrifying. Imagine being a small folk and going in there to petition the throne to get back some, like be compensated for goats that their dragons have burned on your property or something.
Yeah, lost goats or lost cattle.
Yeah.
When we first see it, when Damon is sitting on the throne.
Yeah. Oh
And it's like,
man.
oh wow, he definitely has that I don't care attitude, or I'll
Yeah.
do whatever I want.
And this reminds
Prince of the city.
Yeah, didn't we see Jamie like this at one point too? Kind of like sitting on the throne and like like being all snarky.
I think they did show a clip of that in some of Bran's, fever dreams, warg dreams, but we hear him and Jamie and Ned talk about it, because that when Ned came into the city
right
during the sack of King's Landing, Ned found Jamie on the Iron Throne because he had killed the Mad King. So we didn't see it for a long, but I think maybe in season 7 or 8, they just put a brief, fast little sequence of shots, from Bran's dream of a dragon flying over the city and all that sort of thing. I can't remember.
Right, good memory.
I'm pretty sure when they finally showed the Mad King, saying burn it all, burn them all, burn them all, burn them all.
Yeah.
So we may have seen Jamie, with like blood on his sword, sitting there for a brief second, but definitely in the books, Ned and Jamie have a not a showdown, but I mean, because Jamie
they sort of face off though, for sure.
Yeah, without coming to swords.
Yeah. That's a tense moment, and I'm a little bit rusty with my lore because it's been a couple of years, but
same here.
But it's starting to come back, so that we'll be back on point shortly enough. So Sir Harold Westerling is not stoked about that, but Rhaenyra is pretty chill about it.
Harold Westerling is Lord Commander of the King's Guard.
Oh.
So that he and the king and the throne room, that's all kind of his responsibility to make sure that everything's done correctly and the king and his family are protected and all that. So he walks in or escorts Rhaenyra in, like, Gods be good.
Gods be good.
Because, I mean, that is just straight blasphemy, treason.
Yeah, treason.
And I think she says that in Valerian, or maybe after, once they're speaking in English again.
I wrote down I transcribed it. What do you think you're doing, Uncle? Sitting. This could be, my chair one day. Not if you're executed for treason. Damn. But it's kind of like a joking back and forth that they have, where he's like, I'm back in town for, I heard that he's hosting a tournament in my honor. And she's like, oh, no, he's hosting a tournament for the heir. And he's like,
right. Yeah. Again,
just
that shows you
said.
Damon's mindset is like, oh, I'm the heir. So, this tournament is for me,
Yeah. But they both sort of smile about it. And it's like a bit of a playful banter, it seems.
Yep.
So it seems like these two have, they've got a little bit of a relationship going there. They're, not like, I don't mean like romantically, but they're like on good terms, these two.
Very, yeah.
So this is that other moment that we get with Daemon showing his sort of softer side, where the reason he's here basically is to bring her a gift that he bought her, which is really cool. It's a Valyrian steel necklace. Like, just like Dark Sister, like Blackfire, which we get a glimpse of later. We'll talk about that. Sorry to bring it up now. But she's pretty excited about it. She takes off her gold necklace, and he places the Valyrian steel around her neck. And it's kind of a cool moment where he says, now you and I both own a small piece of our ancestry, which is pretty badass. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, there's such Valyrian steel is such a rare and precious commodity in this universe, in this time frame. And, it was made in Old Valyria, and there are a few blacksmiths who knew how to remake it and reforge it, people that Tywin Lannister employs to reforge ice, after he does what he does at the Red Wedding. But still, the doom of Valyria is well behind us, even now at this point in the timeline.
Yeah.
So any Valyrian steel is a very precious commodity. I just wonder how that necklace would work if she used it against a White Walker,
swings
or
it at
a
him.
white. If he just swings it like a mace with no ball on the end of it. Anyway, I mean, it might work.
Yeah, who knows? Is it just contact with Valyrian steel that kills a White Walker, or does it have to pierce the skin and contact blood? It's an interesting experiment. That'd be funny as hell to find out. But yeah, every once in a while, a maester, if they're like a super good maester, as they're forging their rings of their necklace, they'll learn how to reforge Valyrian steel, and they'll have a Valyrian steel ring hanging around their neck. So that's pretty special when they get to that level and they're able to do that.
Yeah, I think those those maesters, once if they forge that Valerian ring, I think that they've mastered the studies of like the darker arts, the mysteries of using the glass candles.
Oh
And
man,
seeing across, sort of like a Palantir from Lord of the Rings,
nice.
and using, learning about, those the more magical side of this universe is, when they forge their Valyrian steel ring. But I was going to ask you, I didn't see the maesters they were dressed differently now
With
than
funky little
they were
hats.
in the original show.
Like
They had
Walter
their
Frey
little,
hats, right?
their little exactly their little Frey hats, and
I think I saw a chain on Maester Mellos, Grand Maester
okay, yeah,
Mellos.
and so their robes were different. I mean, Pycelle, their robes in the original
Pycelle,
show
oh my God, I forgot about
always
it.
looked like their robes looked like beggars almost. They were just like sackcloth or burlap or something really cheap. But these guys are a little bit more fancy. But I didn't notice their rings, or their chain. That's what it's called, chained. And when a maester gets certified, it's called chained and sworn. I can't remember. There's a phrase like once you're a certified maester.
Nice.
But anyway, I was wondering if you had noticed a chain on the maesters, because Pycelle's was obviously, and all the other maesters in the original show, it was very obvious. It hung outside their garment, way down low, almost down, past their chest.
Yep. I think I saw, I'm pretty sure I saw a chain. It's interesting. You paid more attention to the clothing, and I was like, oh, I see the chain. That's how I know he's a maester.
Nice.
So yeah, we definitely have some different styling of the maesters, which is pretty cool. Interesting to see how everything evolves over time. That pretty much wraps up my number 2. How about you? What do you got?
All right, my number 2 is, I think, what is going to be the water cooler conversation piece of this first episode is, the tournament overlaid with Emma in the birthing scene.
All right,
how those two are intercut, and just how just brutal and, I mean, truly medieval it was, for women to give birth, or if there was complications,
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even 50-50 back then.
What do? You can't give him milk of the poppy either, right? Because that would be potentially harmful
said,
to the babe.
she's screaming when Viserys first gets back there. She's screaming and in pain. He's like, "Give her something." And Mellos says, "We've given her as much milk of the poppy without risking the child."
Oh yeah, I missed that.
So I mean, even nowadays, if you give pain medicine to the mom, it can get into the bloodstream of the baby. But makes you thankful for modern day medicine. But earlier in the episode, Emma was talking to Rhaenyra and said, the child bed is our battlefield.
Yeah.
We must face it. We must face it with a stiff lip. So, and there hasn't been a war in, I think they said some 60 or 70 years. And all these knights and squires, haven't had a war to fight and test their, prowess in a long time. So these tournaments are just their way to rage and get out all their pent up anger and aggression and everything.
Who was it? Rhaenys that mentioned that?
Yeah, how and she sort of has she's drinking and knowing things in the tournament. And the day grows ugly, I think was what she said.
Yeah,
or violent.
It's interesting how the birthing scene and the tournament both start off well. They follow the same sort of trajectory. They're going well, and then violence starts at the tournament, and then immediately after that, the birthing scene goes bad, and they both go just downhill big time. And interesting that she mentioned that these guys aren't you're talking about. They come to the tournaments to get out their anger and stuff like that, but they don't know battle. It was just like Catelyn Stark at Renly's little tournament that he had, where Brienne of Tarth was fighting Sir Loras, and she beat him to become on Renly's Kingsguard. And while she was meeting with Catelyn Stark, Catelyn said, like, these are just summer soldiers. None of them have experienced battle. They don't know they're not ready for winter, and winter is coming. So that was like a cool parallel to Game of Thrones that gave us like a little bit of an illusion or a evoked Game of Thrones itself, which was pretty cool.
Yep, nights green as summer grass.
Yeah, nice. Anything else you want to mention about that?
Not really. I mean, it starts off and Emma's in pain, but then as you know, Melos, you know, pulls Viserys aside and say sometimes it's, you know, the father has to make an impossible choice, and then once they start that, you know, cesarean section, a lot of her screams, you know, in the sound mix start to be muted, and you see her screaming and writhing in pain.
Oh yeah,
As
it was
they're
so brutal.
and they're cutting her, and then when you know they pull the baby out. But the violence of the tournament, you know, when it cuts back to there, you know, it's very loud, and you're hearing, you know, the horses and the lances and swords. You know, the few times that it come, you know, they get knocked off, and then but they, you know, pick up a sword.
Right, they're showing the parallel of the two different battlefields.
Right, you know, those in this universe, you know, the battlefield for women, you know, is the childbed. So that, you know, so it's just so, I mean, in a complicated free uh labor and delivery, you know, it was probably 50-50. But if a baby is breached like that and can't be turned, you know, the correct position to be birthed, I mean, is really, really bad, you know, for both of them, you know, potentially, as we see here, but definitely, you know, very, very bad for the
Oh
mother,
man, yeah, it's so
especially
brutal.
in when it's a queen and the
Yeah,
king lacks a male heir, which
yeah,
is the, you know, the position that Viserys gets puts into, which I mean, this is just, I mean, brutal and awful.
and oh man, she kind of sealed her own fate. Also, with their previous conversation that they were having when she was in the bathtub, she had said to him like, "This is the last time. You know, I've had all these stillborns, I've had these miscarriages. Like, I can't do it again. This is the last one." And so, when faced with this impossible choice between the wife and the child, knowing that the wife is not willing to make another child, she kind of forced his hand into picking the child. Unfortunately, uh,
Yeah, just so brutal. A quote from A Clash of Kings in one of the Catelyn chapters. Catelyn says, "Knights die in battle." Catelyn reminded her. Brienne looked at her with those blue and beautiful eyes. As ladies die in childbed, no one sings songs about them.
woof,
So
man, damn. How do you have time to do this research, bro? You're like the busiest dude on the planet.
a lot of it, you know, I just come across on Twitter, and then I just screenshot it
Nice.
and just save it to my phone where I can just find it and click on it. And so there's
Hell yeah.
some really good. Um, that was from at Sir ASOIF on Twitter. So SER and then A Song of Ice and Fire, just the acronym
Good stuff.
on Twitter. He's a good follow.
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna have to subscribe to or follow him as well. While we're mentioning the birthing scene, I noticed something on Viserys's hip that could have been potentially useful in that scene. Um, you might recognize it from when Catelyn had to save Bran in a Game of Thrones in season 1 when Joffrey sent the assassin to go take him out, the cat's paw dagger. He's got it on him the whole time, and he keeps reaching down and touching it and looking at it. It's a Valerian steel. It's the sharpest sword in that room, or the sharpest blade in that room, unless the Maester has a Valerian steel blade, which is possible. I hadn't considered that until this moment. But I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm thinking that, oh my God, he's going to take out that dagger and offer it to use it for the C-section. I was thinking if it's the sharpest blade there, it would make the cleanest cuts, it'd be the least painful. But didn't happen. So I'm going to assume the Maester has Valerian steel as well.
He has a Valerian steel scalpel.
Yeah, maybe the Maesters, once they forge their Valerian steel ring, they just make a whole bunch of scalpels and distribute them around the whole whole Westeros, Seven
Nice.
Kingdoms. Yeah. So what is it? My turn now. My number 3 here.
Sure, go for it.
All right. My number 3 is Dragon Dreams as a whole. And we've got a few scenes that kind of reference this type of thing. We're at the bathtub scene where Emma is in the tepid water, and we see Viserys is placing his hand over the candle flames earlier. And I'm wondering, could he be a true dragon, impervious to fire like Daenerys as she walked through the burning hut? It emerged from the raging inferno at Vaes Dothrak, which was epic. And Emma in the tub says, after this miserable pregnancy, I wouldn't be surprised if I hatched an actual dragon, which is referencing how multiple Targaryen women have given birth to hideous, deformed, scaly children that are stillborn and sort of resembled dragons. None of them have survived birth. Even Dany, her child Rhaego, was born in this manner, scaly and deformed with the meat sloughing off of his bones, as they describe in the books. So that was pretty intense. And Viserys here is talking about his dream that he had of the baby coming out of the womb with wearing Aegon's iron circlet, his little crown, and he mentions that Dany's the Dreamer had saved the Targaryen line from the doom of Valyria when she had a prophecy in the form of a dream that warned them of the doom, and nobody believed her, but she forced them to leave anyway, and then the doom occurred, and the Targaryens were spared because of that dream. And so it's interesting. It seems that many Targaryens are obsessed with their dreams, and for good reason, considering how Dany's dream actually did save the Targaryens. But we have Rhaegar, who dreamed of the prince that was promised, I believe, and we have Dany has dragon dreams as well in the books, and others throughout the Targaryen line are plagued with these dreams, and they're probably terrified of them because of the story of Dany's, and they become so obsessed with them. Unfortunately, they normally result in the horrors and and self-fulfilling prophecies that result in destruction and death and chaos, like the tragedy at Summerhall. I think was a big, bad, negative result of. Is that Rhaegar, or am I thinking of the
Rhaegar was born. Rhaegar, I believe,
he was born
Rhaegar
at
was born at Summerhall.
Right. It was
so. It was
Egg. Egg was having the dreams that led him to like feverishly try to hatch a dragon and catch the whole place on fire.
And then Aerys, the Mad King, was having he was tripping on all sorts of stuff, and became literally crazy. That was, ended up being the end of the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty.
Yeah, definitely. In this scene, we also get a mention of Visenya from, Rhaenyra thought that Emma was going to have a child that was a girl, and even named her preemptively, and she named her Visenya. And I thought that was interesting. We'll talk about it a little later on, but we get all these parallels between Rhaenyra and Arya Stark, who also was obsessed with Nymeria. Rhaenyra is, wanting to name her Visenya. Visenya was one of Aegon the Conqueror's two sister wives, the original wielder of Dark Sister, a fearless warrior and potentially a sorceress, if I remember correctly. And she's responsible for creating the Kingsguard after she and Aegon the Conqueror were attacked in the street, and Aegon barely survived. And he was like, I don't need any better protection. And so Visenya busted out her sword and sliced one of his protectors on the face just to prove that he was poorly protected. And she managed to convince him and create the Kingsguard, which has probably helped subsequently. So that's interesting. But yeah, we have this mention of Viserys's dream here of the baby being born wearing a crown and everything. And Emma, his queen, is like, oh my God, like, birth is already painful enough. With the head is already large enough. It doesn't need to be any bigger with a crown on it.
Brutal.
Yeah. So we get to see how pretty quickly in short order how Viserys's dream does not play out as he imagined it, just like many of the Targaryens as we get to the tournament, and everything goes bad, and everything goes bad with the birth, and it just shows that you can't trust your dreams except for Dany's for some reason. But interestingly, at that tournament, I noticed everything is starting. Viserys is giving a speech, and then Rhaenyra comes running in and sits down, and it reminded me of Arya. So first of all, Both of these series, House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, in episode 1 start with a tournament, right? We have the tournament for the hand, which King Robert is setting up in Ned's honor at Winterfell. And we have the tournament for the heir here. And in both cases, we have the tomboy daughter showing up late for like a major thing. So as King Robert is arriving at Winterfell, Arya shows up late and she's wearing a helmet. And Ned is like, what are you doing?
What is going on right now?
Yeah, Catelyn like makes her take off the helmet. And here we get another parallel with Rhaenyra and Arya as she shows up late for the festival. And I thought that was funny. Interestingly, we get a mention of a mystery night at the tournament here, which was kind of cool because the concept of a mystery night comes up a few times in this story. And I thought this was neat because one of the most legendary occurrences of the mystery night is the Night of the Laughing Tree, who gets revenge for a scorned Crannog man who was kind of abused by a few squires. And people thought that people suspected that the Knight of the Laughing Tree may have actually been Lyanna Stark, who is a notoriously skilled horseback rider. So that was kind of cool.
At the great tourney at Harren Hall.
Yeah, exactly. So hearing the mention of a mystery night kind of evoked that in my mind.
Yep, same.
And then we get to see a Baratheon here who kind of disrespects the queen who never was, as he calls her. I was like, damn, that's a dick thing to say. But it was cool to see the Baratheon sigil. And like you mentioned, GoM wanting to see like more colors and stuff. We get the bright yellow shield that he's got with the crowned stag. Interestingly, I might have told you this. I discovered that in my ancestry a few generations back as this family Betts, their surname, and the sigil of Betts is a crowned stag, interestingly enough.
Nice, so very cool.
So knowing that now, I feel a special kind of kinship to House Baratheon. But it's kind of a common thing in English house crests or whatever. There's like a whole bunch of different animals that all have, they're emerging from different kind of crowns depending on what level of nobility the lord of the household would be.
Nice.
At this tournament, also, we get mentions of Stokeworth and Tarly, calling to mind Lolly's Stokeworth, Bronn's fugly wife, and Samwell Tarly, the Samwise Gamgee of A Song of Ice and Fire. So that was kind of cool.
Jon Snow's Samwise. Yep.
Yeah. We get some really cool. Just to explain how I'm like kind of off the subject of dragon dreams, I took all the scenes of dragon dreams and put them in order just to like kind of go through each scene as they go. But we get some cool first person shots, like video game kind of shots where you're looking out of the visor during the jousting. You're like watching as Daemon is approaching Sir Criston Cole or one of those guys. Maybe actually I think it was the High Tower that what a cheap shot.
His first opponent.
Yeah, he took out the horse. Man, that was messed up, dude.
Right, yeah. After both getting good licks on the first pass, he comes back on the second pass and is like, well, I'm going to pull out all the stops, and takes the horse out from under him. Which I thought, maybe someone at the tournament, Lord Hightower, or, well, I guess he's not Lord because I think they said Otto Hightower is second born son. Anyway, the hand of the king, Otto Hightower. I thought he might cry foul. I don't know if there's rules for a tournament like that where you can't joust the horse or you can't trip the horse.
There should be.
I guess it's no holds barred, like backyard brawling. Wrestling. There's no rules in the Westerosi tournaments. It's just whatever goes.
Crazy too how Daemon doesn't have a face shield on his helmet. You could get
because it's Matt Smith. You can't cover up Matt Smith's beautiful face.
I think it was one of the King Richards in England. Correction, it's Henry II of France who was killed in a joust when a splinter from one of the lances went into his helmet.
Oh, brutal!
But we get to see some interaction here with Sir Harold and Rhaenyra. When she's asking about Criston Cole, wondering who he is. And this was kind of cool because Sir Harold reminds me of Davos visually. They're very similar looking, and even their voice kind of sounds similar to me. So he's like kind of a great casting for this show because he just fits right in with established looks and sounds and everything. But the relationship between Sir Harold, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and Rhaenyra kind of reminds me of Davos and Stannis' daughter. Also, the way that they're kind of like buddy and everything like that. So that was kind of cool. I liked that whole connection. We also get a mention of Sir Harold is explaining here. He mentions how Sir Criston is common-born, the son of Lord Dondarrion's steward. And we're getting all these name drops here that are like putting us back in Game of Thrones mode. So here it's evoking Beric Dondarrion, which is pretty cool. I like that mention.
Dondarrion.
And Rhaenyra seems to be particularly intrigued by Sir Criston Cole. So I'm wondering if this is possible foreshadowing of him being important in some kind of way. Unfortunately.
I think so. And I think the Dondarrions are a house from the Stormlands. I can double check and look that up, but that sounds right. So they said it was a son of his steward, but then he takes off his helmet and Alicent Hightower, says, "Oh my goodness, he's Dornish."
He's Dornish.
So I guess his Dondarrion steward had a Dornish steward, or hooked up with a Dornish, woman and, had a Dornish child. But anyway, but the Stormlands, butt up, they're adjacent to Dorne. And, the Dornish marches are where the Stormlands and then the Reach, sometimes, had battles and wars with the Dornish people through the mountain passes and stuff. So, I mean, it makes sense that
interesting.
Some Dornish people might be in the Stormlands, and then a Stormland lord might have a steward or servants, from Dorne. So I thought it was interesting to get mentions of House Dondarrion and the fact that Criston, I had forgotten that Criston Cole is Dornish.
Yeah. And I noticed as Daemon rides up for the first time on his horse that he's got the wings sticking off of his helmet, the dragon wings, but it looks like they're made of rubber because I saw one kind of like bouncing around a little bit. I was like, oh man, like
nice.
Drove me crazy. Hightower, the jouster, his helmet looked really cool. It was like in the shape of a tower with crenellations and stuff.
Yeah, I noticed that the second time. I think I saw a tweet or something about it, and I looked at it for his helmet on the second watch. And I mean, the helmet itself is pretty normal, but on the top, it's just like a little somebody welded, or however they didn't have however they welded things. They blacksmithed it, I guess, a little tower from the high tower, and just popped it right on the top of his helmet. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. And I noticed that the tip of Daemon's lance is like a bronze closed fist.
Yeah, it's a fist. That's cool.
Punching people. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, then we see how the birth goes badly, and his dream is just not going the right way at all compared to what he sees in his mind. And I was surprised to see Daemon being defeated because he's pretty renowned as like an excellent warrior, like the best of this age, I think. And so that was a really cool shot, how he kind of like falls off the horse and he's being dragged sideways along the top of the rail at the center of the list.
Did you notice the sound?
What did it sound like?
Like when he's off the horse, but he's like getting dragged across the top of that rail. It's this like screeching, like metal on metal. It's a really cool sound. Go back and listen to it. It's like, and then he reaches the end of it and it's like boom, hits the ground.
That was so cool.
It was cool. Cool sound design.
And apparently you can decide to continue in a contest of arms if you fall off your horse.
Right, you fall off your horse and you don't get blinded Sir Gawain Hightower. I'm pretty sure he's the one going forward. He's blind, and I may be thinking of a different Hightower or different Tyrell. I'm thinking of a Tyrell somewhere in the story who was blinded. I thought an attorney, but it could have been from something. It may have been from war.
That's rugged.
I can't remember one eye or both eyes. Anyway, pretty interesting that and of course, Daemon selected Hightower as his first opponent,
Right, because he hates the hand.
He's at odds with the hand, Otto Hightower.
Yep.
So it's he's very purposeful in who he chooses there. And I believe Daemon won a lot of tournaments in his day, but I did remember
there was one time
from the books that in this particular tournament, an up and coming young knight. I guess they already call him Sir Criston Cole. I think. So he's already a knight. I don't think they let squires joust, do they, in a tournament? There may be like a squire. There may be like a squire round of
maybe
jousting,
like the amateur,
the minor league,
the kids
jousts.
Table at Thanksgiving.
Exactly. But in this case, that Daemon lost the joust to Sir Criston Cole.
Very surprising, and I thought it was nuts that he pulled out Dark Sister, the Valerian steel sword, to use in the contest of arms instead of a blunted tourney sword, which is kind of what you would expect at a tourney.
Right, a normal situation, or in the melee, there's, they have maces and morning stars, but, they have a tournament sword, where people aren't going to die. But as we saw, that one guy got his face completely, mashed potatoed.
Ripped apart,
so these tournaments are definitely hardcore.
We did see a Morningstar too with Cole wielding that, which was really cool. And Daemon beats him at first, and it starts to prematurely celebrate like the Red Viper. And we know how that works out.
Yeah,
so he got taken out from behind and forced to yield, which is crazy.
But he still wouldn't say the word. I mean, he yielded in action, but he still couldn't bring himself to say the words.
Yeah,
I yield.
Good point.
So, I mean, Daemon definitely has pride issues, but I noticed that too. He does his victory lap, and then Criston Cole, ends up turning the tables on him. I'm like, oh no, it's Oberyn all over again.
Yep, and he's defeated, and it's at this point that Queen Aemma sadly dies, unfortunately. So it's kind of funny how Viserys had said that he was more sure about the child being a boy than anything in his whole life. But then he was so thrashed by the horrific scene of the C-section and everything that it had shaken his confidence in his whole foundation of his belief system, it seemed, because when the maester tells him it's a boy, he's like, it's a boy. Like he can hardly even believe it. Seems surprised.
Totally in shock.
Yeah.
And disbelief.
What a mess. So the next mention of dragon dreams that we get is the epic stories about Daenys and Aegon that we get from Viserys as he meets with Rhaenyra before Balerion's enormous skull. Tells her there's something that he needs to tell her. It might be difficult to understand, but that ambition is not what drove Aegon to conquer the Seven Kingdoms. It was out of necessity, based on a dream that he had where a terrible winter would gust out of the distant north, and he saw absolute darkness riding on those winds, and whatever dwells within would destroy the world of the living. Clearly, he's talking about the events of season 8, the new long night that's approaching, and man, I got goosebumps. I got them again, even just thinking about this right now. Whew, so intense. And Aegon called his dream the Song of Ice and Fire. And if I remember correctly, Egg in his dreams that spurned the hatching of the dragon, or the attempted hatching of the dragon at Summerhall, he had prophesied from a dream, the prince that was promised, and his shall be the Song of Ice and Fire, if I remember the quote. And it was interesting, right at this moment when he mentions the Song of Ice and Fire, the mournful dragon music begins to play that we are familiar with from Daenerys and the dragons on the strings.
Yep.
So that was pretty intense. And he tells her, this secret's been passed from king to heir since Aegon's time. Now you must promise to carry it and protect it. Promise me this, Rhaenyra. Promise me.
Promise me. Promise me, Ned.
Yeah.
Promise me.
So that was clearly...
Take care of the boy.
Yeah, a reference to Lyanna Stark's dying wishes to Ned, and possibly foreshadowing the death of Viserys, which we know has got to happen for the dance to occur.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, damn, pretty intense. And that wraps up Dragon Dreams for me, number 3. How about you?
Wow, just a little bit more on that. How they're,
Sure.
I mean, they're not changing the canon. They're adding, this really cool piece of Aegon wasn't just the conqueror, for the sake of conquering, that he, somehow had this dream. Not really a prophecy, like in the Matrix, the prophecy, or in Star Wars where, the prophecy, you're supposed to, bring balance to the Force, the chosen one. But it's more like a dream or a premonition, from the gods or from the universe or, however you want to kind of describe it.
And he ended up being right.
Right.
And the kingdom was divided when the White Walkers came.
Yeah, because, his, great grandson Ares, had been overthrown and usurped, and, what they call it, War of the Five Kings?
Yeah, I think so.
Because after Robert died, you had Joffrey.
Oh, yeah,
Stannis,
the events
Renly,
of Game of Thrones.
Robb. And I can't remember. Anyway, so many different players with different claims to the throne. So it's really cool that, some people are saying it's too on the nose for him to say the phrase "a song of ice and fire."
I don't think so.
And that it's just marketing and branding to tie in House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones. But everybody knows that this is a Game of Thrones prequel series. You got the Targaryens, got the Starks, you got some new people that you didn't have back then, the Valerians and the Hightower. The Hightowers were still around, but they just never really made it into the story of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, yeah, true.
But to tie the two together, and with this passing down this critical, vital information from Aegon to his son, to Maegor, and on and on and on, down to from Jaehaerys to Viserys, and now to Rhaenyra.
And then when the Targs are taken out, it's like it gets lost in the wind, and
and somehow it gets lost into history.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, this isn't a spoiler. This is just me, with a theory. Crackpot time. ZB's crackpot corner. That. In a lot of things are going to be lost. Dragons are going to be lost in this dance.
Magic is lost.
I think one of these things that may be lost is this passing of information about the coming darkness, the long winter that's coming, because now Rhaenyra knows, but if she, I don't want to give anything away about the future story, but a poetic irony or tragedy that may happen going forward, that this information that's only passed from king to successor could potentially be lost, in the coming dance. Is pretty, the ramifications or the what's at stake, is, the fate of Westeros potentially.
It's crazy.
So,
Didn't
cool.
Melisandre, she was familiar with the concept of the prince that was promised, correct?
Right.
And
Azor Ahai, I can't remember which one she called it.
Oh, yeah, she was obsessed with Azor
different
Ahai.
names.
Did Dany's older brother, Viserys, did he know about the prince that was promised?
I know Rhaegar, that was part of his...
Oh, Rhaegar, yeah. So I think
being obsessed about the prince that was promised and that sort of thing.
And talked about it to Dany.
But if the dance hadn't happened or it had turned out differently, maybe this information continues to get passed on through the Targaryen line down to, from Aerys, the Mad King, to Rhaegar. And maybe that changes what happens with Aerys. Yeah,
because we get caught off guard big time.
Right. And some theorize that Rhaegar's meeting at the Great Tournament at Harren Hall was to basically devise a way, with the lords, of the great houses to, he's the successor, Rhaegar was, but he knew that Aerys was going down a bad path. Right. So he needed, but that's a theory that Rhaegar was trying to, find a way politically, without a war, to get rid of the Mad King, and install himself. But obviously that didn't happen. But if Aerys and Rhaegar had known firsthand from their father or grandfather about the coming long night, they probably would have been like, okay, let's keep ourselves, straightened out and not crazy, and get ready for the long winter.
Yeah, and people speculate that Bran had been sending him messages telepathically, or the Raven, the three-eyed Raven, that burned them all. He may have been seeing visions of the White Walkers and the dead coming from the north.
More dragon dreams, potentially.
Yeah, so pretty
cool.
Pretty crazy. All right, so what's your number 3, brother?
Awesome. My number 3 is The Great Council of 101.
Nice.
I mean, we're dropped right into the series, so the voice of the prologue with the voiceover is Rhaenyra, but it's not Millie Alcock who plays young Rhaenyra that we see in this episode. It's Emma Darcy, however you pronounce her name.
Right, yeah.
The actress who plays grown Rhaenyra, who obviously we've yet to see. So, and she says, it's the daughter of Viserys because she, introduces the Great Council. The only thing that can tear down House Targaryen is itself. And she says, my father was chosen at the Great Council by all the lords paramount of the Seven Kingdoms, yada, yada. So right there, we know that it's Rhaenyra talking because she's the only living child that we know of Viserys at that point. What happens with, young baby Balon in this episode. But it's the older Rhaenyra telling this story,
Crazy, yeah. I hadn't realized that at the time that it was the older version. I didn't realize there was more than one version, until I was looking at IMDb.
So we're still some 20 years before, the actual dance begins.
We're going to get a time jump at some point.
Yeah, or it may slowly, and they're saying that this, Emma Darcy doing this voiceover may be sort of a bridge from now, the beginning of the story with Viserys and Rhaenyra, and
this is like a flashback.
Their family, it's a bridge to the next,
stage
whenever we get the time jump to when the dance actually starts. If 20 years go by, and Rhaenyra is supposed to be 8 or 9 years old right now, maybe a little older. She looks like she's 13 or 14 to me, but anyway, how TV people look younger and older at random times. But if 20 years go by, they can't really have this, wouldn't really be functional to try to age up, an actress. So they just basically cast young Rhaenyra and older, 25 or 30-year-old something Rhaenyra.
Good to know.
With 2 different actresses. So she does the voiceover, and we see, this crowd. It's this dark room. And then it took me like 3 or 4 seconds, the maesters or whoever those dudes are, walking forward with the chest, in this little processional. And I'm like, oh, they're at Harren Hall. I had forgotten that the Great Council of 101 is at Harren Hall.
Yeah,
and
of course, I'm ruined.
Like, some people were like, oh, we're going to see Harren Hall and it's going to be awesome. I'm like, no, Harren Hall was burned in the conquest.
Yeah, I had totally forgotten a lot of stuff in the 3 years between the things. So I was like, oh, cool, we're going to see Harren Hall. I think I said that. It was probably me that said that to you.
That's funny.
Yeah, and you're like, no. I was like, oh.
But we did see it, but it seemed like it was more intact than we saw Harren Hall in Game of Thrones. It was a ruin at that point when Tywin is using it as a base in the Riverlands, for his war against Robb Stark. But we see it, in darkness, but it's still, a total broken shell. And, it looked a little bit like how the Red Keep looked as Daenerys is
with all the snow,
destroying everything. In the series finale of Game of Thrones, it's just dark. And everything about the Great Council is a great place to start the story. It's a prologue, and then we jump, another few years to where this starts when Rhaenyra,
9 years
a young
later,
girl.
maybe.
So it's really awesome to see Harren Hall. It's still a ruin, but functional and usable but it's huge. It's humongous. And that's why they held it there. It's in the middle of the continent, more or less. But it can hold, lords from the north, lords from the west, lords from the Vale, the Reach, the Stormlands. Really cool.
I did a little research on this to remind myself about the details, and Harren Hall was the biggest castle ever built in the Seven Kingdoms by Harren the Black on the north shore of the God's Eye. It's a giant lake with a big island south of the Trident and west of the King's Road. 5 dizzyingly tall towers and walls to match. The shortest tower was 1.5 times as tall as the tallest tower of Winterfell. It's enormously thick walls where you have to pass through 12 murder slots, are only rivaled by the Storm's End, the Baratheon castle, which has walls 40 feet thick. The hall that they're in here is the Hall of the 100 Hearths, but in reality it only has 30 to 35 hearths, but it could fit an entire army within. It's impenetrable from every direction except above. Harren the Black did not count on Aegon and the dragons. Coincidentally, it was the day that Harren the Black moved in to Harren Hall that Aegon landed in King's Landing from Dragonstone atop Valerian to begin the conquest. And as we see,
crazy.
Yeah, as we see, it's totally trashed. Valerian melted the towers, roasting the people inside, including Black Harren and his whole family, basically.
Brutal.
So bonkers. Another cool thing about this scene was that we got to see Jaehaerys, the former king.
Yeah, the old king.
Yeah, the conciliator, the wise, the old king. It's our first time seeing him, which is really cool. At 101 AC, which is after the conquest AC, he's the fourth Targaryen king, but he's held the throne for more than half of the entire Targaryen dynasty at this point, the longest ruling Targaryen king ever. He rode Vermithor, which is a badass name, the third largest dragon. His reign was the most prosperous of all the Targaryen kings, and thus, at this point now, we're experiencing Westeros at its height of its decadence, just beginning to fall a little bit as under the reign of the sort of weak king Viserys, but it's like we're going to see all kinds of opulence and things like that, which will be really cool. Jaehaerys was the first king to truly unite Westeros, and sort of like mindful of Pax Romana, an extended period of peace during Rome. He's regarded as one of the best Targaryen kings by a lot of the Westerosi historians who, comment on this extended time of peace that he brought to them. Do you have anything else to add about this?
No, that's it for me.
All right, I got one other thing to point out about this scene. A lot of times in our episodes, we do Game of Thrones and history, and we'll just pick a generic subject from Game of Thrones and have the real-world counterpart. But this episode has a couple that are taking place in the episode, so I figure why not cover it as we're actually talking about the scene, right? So at this point, it says, Jaehaerys called the Great Council to prevent a war being fought over his succession, for he knew the cold truth. The one thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon was itself. And the real-world counterpart to this is Abraham Lincoln from the Lyceum Address, where he said, "At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with the treasure of the earth, our own excepted, in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for a commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio, or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up among us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide." So Lincoln kind of predicted a similar thing about the United States, saying that it's impossible for an outside enemy to take us down. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen from the inside.
Wow. What was the date from that?
Good question. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, I thought you said it at the beginning and I missed it.
It was from the Lyceum Address, Lyceum. I'll add the date in post-production.
Cool.
But yeah, during this whole scene, I think it's worth noting that as Jaehaerys reads the results of the council, that it's Viserys who will be nominated as the heir. He accepts the results, but he does not look happy about it. My guess is that personally, he would have chosen Rhaenys, but he felt it would have ruined his legacy of peace that he worked so hard to forge and secure. And
Fire and Blood, or what's the name of the book? Yeah, Fire and Blood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which I thought would be a better name for the show than House of the Dragon, but they didn't
Yeah,
ask,
that
they
would've
didn't
been
ask
cool.
my opinion when
What?
they were
They
developing the show. So anyway, in Fire and Blood, I think they talk about, what they, because Fire and Blood is written from the perspective of this Grand Maester or Archmaester Gildain putting together this history of House Targaryen. Anyway, so I think he talks about what he thinks, from a historical perspective, what Jaehaerys, which claimant Jaehaerys would have, picked if it was just up to him. I mean, he's king, but he brought the council together so that it wasn't just him picking Rhaenys or somebody else.
What did Gildain think?
I can't remember what he, surmises that Jaehaerys would have picked, but phone's ringing. But it's pretty interesting that instead of the king just deciding his successor, then he brought together the Great Council. That Lincoln Lyceum address, January 27th, 1838.
Oh man.
So 23 years before.
Way before he was
Civil
president,
War.
even.
Yeah, the Civil War started in 1860 or 61 across 5 Aprils.
Man.
From 60 to 65.
That's so crazy.
So well before the Civil War. So
Interesting.
crazy.
Yeah, and the way they depicted Jaehaerys here as the scene is ending, and he just looks miserable about the results. So I think that he really wanted to choose Rhaenys. And interestingly, we have the exact opposite occurring with Viserys in this episode as he chooses Rhaenyra, and sort of fulfilling the worries of Jaehaerys, as we will see, it sends the kingdom into a spiral of civil war amongst the dragons. So
yeah, but it seems like there were some lords and houses that were behind Rhaenys, but ultimately, I can't remember how. I think House Stark wanted in the north, their delegation at Harren Hall basically wanted a male heir, and a few others. I think maybe some of the Western houses or the Reach houses maybe supported Rhaenys. But, go read Fire and Blood. It's good. I just can't remember all those details.
Yep. Yeah, I got to read that too eventually. But yeah, and then at this point, there's like hints of the intro music playing, and it cuts into the scene where the dragon shows up. Yeah. So I think that was the end of your number 4?
Number 3.
Number 3. Okay. Then we'll go with my number 4, which is Daemon. This dude is crazy.
The title of my number 4, Daemon the Brute.
Yeah, there we go. Same page again. So we can just, collab on this. Time for slaughter. It starts off with him first showing up as after Viserys predicts that he'll return for the tournament. He decides to go out with his gold cloaks and slaughter a bunch of alleged criminals. Unfortunately,
not a whole lot of due process or trial by a jury of your peers. There, they pointed at you, rapist.
Yeah,
and then you're done. Murderer. He's gone. Brutal.
So brutal. They gelded a guy like right out in the open, and put his bits and pieces on like a stump or something there. Oh gosh. Man, that was so brutal. I liked how they when he like gets his troops all amped up. When I took command of the watch, you were stray mongrels, starving and undisciplined. Now you're a pack of hounds, and they all howl into the into the night.
Super
so
epic.
Cool. And beginning tonight, King's Landing will learn to fear the color gold. Thought that was epic.
And even into the the modern story of Game of Thrones, and after Robert's Rebellion, the Gold Cloaks are still around, and Tyrion and who do they sneak past those 2 Gold Cloaks? Tyrion's with Bronn there's somebody. Tyrion whacks him in the back of the head in like season 7 or gosh, I can't remember. They sneak up. They're in a little boat. Maybe he's with
Gendry with the hammer.
Grey Worm. Yeah, Gendry has the hammer. Anyway, but those are 2 Gold Cloaks just patrolling the coast of of King's Landing.
Right.
And, the City Watch is still around and still trying to foil the plans of our heroes. So, and I mean, I thought that Daemon instituted the City Watch, like he started it.
Or he revamped it.
Right. It may be that it loosely existed, as basically just sort of a citizen's neighborhood watch kind of a thing. But he brought it together.
And he honed them into a unified body of disciplined fighters. Pretty badass. Let's see. So the next thing I have here is the small council meeting that takes place directly after the slaughtering. And it kind of bounces, it cuts to the next scene, and they're all meeting at the small council chamber. It's interesting. As they walk up, they have these stone spheres that they place on little plates with fitted holes. And it's I was wondering what that meant. Do the spheres signify that this member is present? Like, what if could they give their sphere to somebody else to take their place in a meeting and have them place the stones to know that they're being represented? Did you notice that?
Yeah, it's some kind of form of, okay, I'm here.
Attendance type thing?
I'm ready to, start the meeting. Yeah, but I think they kept focusing on it. So, maybe something with that is going to come into play later.
Yeah, good call.
But I'm not sure what exactly. And a few times when the person leaves, they pick up their little sphere and leave. The one thing I did notice, I don't know if they meant to do this or if it was just in the edit, when Hightower calls the meeting after Emma, after her death, and then I think they show it after they do the funeral pyre out at Dragonstone. But right after that, it's like they jump straight into a small council meeting, and Viserys is, totally distraught, and he's like, "Why are we meeting?" And Hightower's like, "Well, we need to settle your succession."
Right.
So they put Viserys' sphere down, but he gets mad and storms out of the room with Sir Harold Westerling, and they don't show Westerling or King Viserys remove his sphere. Which, I don't think that's going to amount to anything. But it's just something I noticed real quick because I was trying to pay attention to who has the spheres, and there's one little, bowl or whatever for each seat at the small council. And so it must be something to where, or maybe you have to hold the sphere to attend the meeting. And if, so yeah, I guess you could pass it off to a proxy if Corlys Valerian is going to be out, doing another epic voyage, across the narrow sea or something, he could pass his sphere and small council seat, temporarily to another person.
You could. That's a cool phrase. So they're Otto Hightower's all pissed off about this, but you can tell Viserys is still backing Daemon. Basically, he loves his brother, and Daemon does have the right idea. It seems that crime is overrunning the city and it needs to be reined in, but he's obviously going a little bit chaotic with it. The ends don't justify the means necessarily here. No due process or opportunity to defend themselves in court like we've seen prior, where people are they have a chance to tell their side of the story in front of in Daenerys, for example, in Meereen holding court. But like he says, the nobles were coming into the city for the tournament, and they'd all be sitting ducks if crime is really as bad as it seems to be. And this is just more evidence that Viserys is distracted and unfit for rule, as is symbolized by his worsening injury from the throne.
Yeah, he's not really concerned all that much about the details. In that first small council meeting, Corlys Valerian is trying to say, oh, there's these pirates on the stepstones, but then there's this triarchy that has tried to establish itself over the stepstones, and they're working on the pirates. But Valerian's is worried about the threat in the future if that triarchy becomes too powerful. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, Viserys is he opens with a joke, which I think, and ZB's Crackpot Corner, I think that joke, Viserys says something to the tune of, "Oh, and he was looking up. I told him they were looking up the wrong end." And then, so I think that's the punchline of Tyrion's joke about a honeycomb and a jackass,
Entering a
going
brothel.
to a brothel or whatever. So that's my theory.
So when are we going to get the rest of the meat
Yeah, I want
to lead to
the
it?
meat of the joke.
Yeah, we'll have to pay attention for that.
A quick note on Daemon and the City Watch. He instituted their uniform, use of equipment, including the golden cloaks from where they get their name. The weapons,
nice.
The weapons he issued were dirk, short sword, and cudgel. There were
Ooh.
2,000 gold cloaks at the time. I think they mentioned that in this episode.
Yeah.
Said he commands an army of 2,000
Yep.
soldiers in the city, and obviously they seem to be fiercely loyal to Daemon.
Well, he's buying them
yeah.
whores, So.
Yeah, he buys. Yeah, he buys out the brothel for the night. So
Yeah.
they definitely use that cudgel. In the precursor to the real punishments. They were just randomly riding through the city and just cracking people's head. It's
man.
like, if you're out. I mean, they didn't say anything about a curfew, but it seemed like they were just finding random people still walking the street and just cracking them.
Only scoundrels are out at night. It's like your mother
Crazy.
telling you, like, when you're like 16, don't, like only bad kids are out at midnight.
Yeah, nothing good happens after midnight.
Yeah, there you go. Except everything good happens after midnight. But yeah, Daemon is just like a wild man in this scene, talking about the ladies of the Vale in a very disparaging manner, comparing them to saying sheep are more attractive than them. Basically,
Yeah, he's not too fond. He's not too fond of the Vale and the Aarons and the Royces of that kingdom. He's not too fond. But one small detour on the Vale. But Emma Arryn, she's
an
named
Arryn.
Targaryen. Emma Arryn is. I think that one of her golden rings had the little bird.
Oh,
That is the sigil for House Arryn.
Yeah,
But I couldn't. I was trying to pause it, but I couldn't see it real clearly.
I
But
bet
anyway,
it is.
she's half. Her mother was Targaryen, I think Daella, and she was married to an Arryn or a Royce or somebody. One of the main houses of the Vale. Robar Royce? No, that's not right. Anyway,
Robar, it's a cool name.
so her mother was Targaryen, and she married a lord from the Vale and had her. So she was half Targaryen by blood, but her name was Arryn since her father was Arryn, and they that's why she has the white hair. Because normally, if you were only, if you were a normal, like Jon Arryn and their son in Game of Thrones, that dark hair or whatever colored hair. But Emma Arryn, I was like, well, she married. Obviously, there's a lot of family marrying relationships.
Yeah, a lot of intermarriage.
House
going on.
Targaryen. But anyway, so she was an Arryn, half Targaryen, half Arryn. So she had the white Targaryen hair.
Speaking of the white Targaryen hair, we have the Valerians, whose appearances have been significantly changed from the books. But with the white hair contrasting with the black skin, it's pretty badass looking. It's like striking. You know what I mean? Pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So Daemon ends up basically just storming out of this meeting without permission or anything. He just gets up and walks out. And I was like, damn, dude, he's got balls the size of cantaloupes. Freaking crazy.
That don't care attitude, prince of the city, I'll do whatever I want.
Yeah, and you can tell that Viserys loves his brother as he understands his intent despite his flaws, just defending him somewhat and, saying that it might be a good thing in the end that he revamped the City Watch, even though he's basically got an army of his own at this point.
Exactly.
So then we move on to Daemon with Missaria at the brothel. It seems like he's having a little bit. It seems like Daemon might be the floppy dragon,
Floppy fish. He's a floppy dragon.
Fish. He's distracted. He's worried about this birth that's coming up and losing his line in succession, as she points out by saying that the king can't replace you. You're Daemon Targaryen, the rider of Caraxes, wielder of Dark Sister. So it seems like he's worried or mad that he might be overtaken in the line of succession.
Yep, definitely focused on other things.
Yeah, and we talked about the tourney with Daemon, and so that pretty much rounds off my number 4. Oh, sorry. One thing, real quick. One thing.
Yeah.
Damon, it's hinted at, because the Missaria says that I could arrange a maiden with silver hair for you. It's hinted that he has a thing for Rhaenyra. And so I'm wondering, like, is it really like, does he really have a thing for her? Is it like, is he looking at it like a power play? Like, actually, no, he's the heir currently. So Rhaenyra was not in the line of succession necessarily. But yeah, I was thinking maybe like, if he angled towards her, it would solidify his position as heir apparent, basically.
Stay tuned for next week's episode.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, what's your number 4?
Damon the Brute.
Right.
We meet him. He's sitting on the Iron Throne. He's blurred. He's blurred at the very beginning. And Sir Harold Westerling is, I'm sure is ready to intervene and like, no, you're not. You're the prince of the city, maybe Prince of Dragonstone, but you're not the king. You can't sit the Iron Throne. You're not Hand.
It reminded me of the images from the original season 1 Game of Thrones promo art where it had Ned Stark sitting in the chair. Or no, that I'm thinking later on.
That's what we get at the end with Viserys. But but Rhaenyra waves off Westerling is like, it's okay. I'm the princess, so I deem this acceptable.
Yeah.
So, but then it's very dark, and the first time we're seeing the throne room with all the extra swords. I mean, they keep the throne room, the throne that they had in the original show, kind of spice it up a little bit, but all those extra swords down the side.
Cool. Love it.
To make it more book-like. It's still not as epic and tall, but one as they're talking in High Valerian, and as Rhaenyra gets closer, there's a side shot of her at the bottom and kind of up the steps, and you see all the swords, and then Daemon is sitting on the Iron Throne, and it looks a lot more like the book version. And picture, the artist renditions that are out there. Go search the internet
Mark
for
Simonetti
book. Yeah, he has a good. I've seen a few, but just if you want to see, just Google book, A Song of Ice and Fire, Iron Throne, book version or art, but there's some cool. But it looks a lot more because it goes up because there's stairs and there's all the swords. It looks from the side a lot like, a lot more like the book depiction, and how Grimm describes it as this huge staircase of melted swords from Aegon's conquest. So we meet him there on the Iron Throne, and immediately that he doesn't care about, the exact proper, customs and courtesies, and where he wouldn't dare approach the Iron Throne, and he's sitting in the Iron Throne, Jaime Lannister style. So he definitely, is extremely confident, maybe overconfident. And then we see that side of him continuing with the brutality in the City Watch. And then, we see him be more compassionate and heartfelt with Rhaenyra at the funeral.
And giving her the necklace.
The cremation. I mean, anyway. He gives her that necklace, so they obviously have a relationship and care about each other. But then, he's hiding. So when he's not in that small council meeting, when Hightower is trying to get Viserys to settle the succession, but he's like in the little, remember all the little secret passageways that are in the Red Keep?
Yeah, Maegor the Cruel had it built and then killed everybody that built it, so they couldn't really reveal the secrets. Somehow Varys managed to find the blocks to push to open up the passages and figured it out somehow.
Yeah, how Varys and his little birds, used to spy on the Red Keep. So that's sort of how I imagined Daemon was kind of behind some kind of false wall or something, listening. And I mean, it has like a, little holes in whatever that, lattice work or whatever that was that he was cool. behind. But I sort of kind of, went off in my own mind to like, oh, he's probably in one of the secret passageways that Varys used in the original series.
Yeah, because they still know about them at this point.
Right. And I mean, nobody knows them all, but, Maegor knew about them, I would presume, since he had them built. And then, so he probably passed down that knowledge to a select few.
Yeah, probably a lot of the Targs know, but, nobody else.
Awesome.
So my number 5 is pretty short. It's just Valyrian steel. Dark
Nice.
Sister looks so freaking cool when Daemon pulls it out during the battle, or when they're cutting up all the criminals and stuff, and then again at the tourney, we get to see Blackfire, the sword of Aegon the Conqueror, as Viserys is sitting on the throne later, which we'll talk about in a bit. And we get to see the cat's paw dagger, as we mentioned already. And it was just really cool seeing all the Valerian steel, things we haven't seen before. He keeps touching the cat's paw dagger and like looking down at it. I think we're going to find out something more about that dagger that's going to make it interesting. There's got to be some neat history behind it. In like the book of the World of Ice and Fire and everything, there isn't really any information about it. It's sort of like unknown. There's a diagram, but no details about its origins or history. So I'm kind of excited to learn about that because it plays kind of an important role later on in Game of Thrones. What's your number 5?
My number 5 is just Welcome Back to Westeros. Just so many things I haven't thought about since Game of Thrones ended. Well, I guess I can't remember when Fire and Blood came out. Seems like it came out between seasons 7 and 8, maybe. But I mean, just septons and septas, 7 gods, 7 hells. When they kept, a few times in there, gods be good. I'm like, I forgot. Just those little phrases. Maesters and archmaesters, grand maester, Melos. Just the culture of the weirwood tree.
Right. That one I forgot.
In the what do they call the godswood?
Godswood, the heart tree.
The heart tree. So really cool to see all that stuff that we've been away from in the universe for a long time. We got to see the head of House Stark. I think it's Rickon. Maybe I can't remember. We get to see him. We didn't see any Lannisters, so that's a good thing in my opinion. Down with House Lannister. No, besides Tyrion. But it was just cool. Cool to see Dragon.
The original Lannister, Lan, he was cool. Yeah. He snuck in through Casterly Rock and pretended to be a ghost. Ooh, and scared everybody out, and then just
stole Casterly Rock right out from under them.
Slick.
But we saw a little bit of Dragonstone, kind of off in the distance at that funeral cremation ceremony.
Viserys was working on a model that looked like Dragonstone, but like much bigger. Maybe it was like ancient Valyria.
That's what I heard somewhere. Some people
I think Alt-Shift-X was talking about that, right?
I think that's where it was thinking that was possibly a model of old Valyria.
So cool. So that would mean that they came over, landed at Dragonstone, and they built Dragonstone as an homage to Valyrian style architecture. And it does look quite different than
that same kind of architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool. Anything else for number 5?
That's it.
All right. I have number 6, 7, 8.
Nice. And on.
Yeah. My number 6, which is why we're going reverse this episode instead of 5 down to 1,
cool,
is the Game of Thrones. And there's a lot of it in this episode. And I see the Game of Thrones, obviously, as a metaphor for ambition and its dangers, the risks and rewards that come with the fight for winning the throne. So we talked about the first instance with the decision Jaehaerys had to make. So next moment where there may be some foreshadowing and things coming into play here is when it cuts to the scene in the Godswood at the Red Keep, which I don't think we've seen before. It felt like a new set where Rhaenys is sitting with young Alicent Hightower, and they're studying their book for the Septa, and Rhaenys is all disagreeable because she's nervous, and Alicent says to her, like, you aren't worried about your position? Because she's like, no, I'm worried for my father. I hope that he gets a son. And Alicent is taken back by that because if Viserys has a boy, then that would take Rhaenyra right out of the line of succession, effectively. And so the fact that Alicent was thinking about her position in the line of succession, but Rhaenyra wasn't, indicates to me that Alicent has ambitions of her own. And
100%.
And that she's thinking in terms of the Game of Thrones, whereas Rhaenyra is just, doing her own thing, kind of. So
sort of like Arya. Arya would rather swordplay and
Yeah.
be a knight and ride horses and go into battle than to be a Stark of Winterfell and be responsible and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I've got a whole section about that coming up.
Oh, nice. Otto Hightower also playing the Game of Thrones.
Yup. Yeah, I got that coming up here too. So the next scene that we get a taste of this is the scene as Viserys is having his wound tended to by the maester and his assistant. And we learn that it's a small cut from sitting on the throne. And the message here is that the throne is sharp and dangerous, and you're not supposed to be comfortable sitting on it. You have to be on point, which is a metaphor for the way that you must rule attentively with caution. Maegor the Cruel, who built the Maegor's Holdfast in the Red Keep with all the passages, as we just mentioned, and killed everybody to protect its secrets, was found dead on the throne, sliced by...
that's right. I forgot about that.
Sliced by its barbs, potentially, although it's likely he was murdered for his cruelty. The story's kind of stuck that he was killed by the throne, and the inherent danger of the throne itself serves as a metaphor for the danger of kingship. And
the most dangerous seat in Westeros.
Yeah. And this reminds me of the Sword of Damocles. Have you ever heard of that before?
Yeah, I heard about that. That may have been Alt Shift X may have talked about that too. But
nice.
I heard or read about that somewhere. Somebody was mentioning that.
Nice. Yeah, I got an excerpt from Wikipedia here. And it says, according to the story, Damocles was pandering. This is like ancient Greek stuff. Damocles was pandering to his king, Dionysius, claiming that Dionysius was truly fortunate as a great man of power and authority without peer, surrounded by magnificence. In response, Dionysius offered to switch places with Damocles for one day so that Damocles could taste that very fortune firsthand. Damocles quickly and eagerly accepted the king's proposal, and he sat on the king's throne, surrounded by countless luxuries. There were beautifully embroidered rugs, fragrant perfumes, the most selective foods, piles of silver and gold, and the service of attendants unparalleled in their beauty, surrounding Damocles with riches in excess. But Dionysius, who had made many enemies during his reign, arranged that a sword should hang above the throne, held at the pommel by only a single hair of a horse's tail, to evoke the sense of what it's like to be king. Though having much fortune, always having to watch in fear and anxiety against dangers that might try to overtake you. Damocles finally begged the king that he be allowed to depart because he no longer wanted to be so fortunate, realizing that with great power comes great responsibility, or as the notorious B.I.G. said, "Mo money, mo problems." King Dionysius effectively conveyed the sense of constant fear in which a person with great power may live. Dionysius committed many cruelties in his rise to power, such that he could never go on to rule justly, because that would make him vulnerable to his enemies. Cicero used this story as the last in a series of contrasting examples for reaching the conclusion in his 5th disputation, in which the theme is that having virtue is sufficient for living a happy life. Like, you don't need money, you don't need power, just be virtuous, be good, and you'll be whole. Money can't make you whole, power can't make you whole. And Cersei certainly learned that. She lost everything in her quest to become queen, and died miserable.
Yep.
Pretty hardcore. And so then we have that small council meeting regarding succession, and Corlys basically is talking about how the precedent's already set, and it's his wife, Rhaenys, that was spurned by Jaehaerys. So I think he's being a bit sarcastic about this, because he seems a bit salty still. And Otto realizes he fucked up by giving Daemon the control over the army. And this is all just chaos. There's so many unintended consequences. Otto is trying to remove Daemon from the line of succession because he's got his own ambitions. And in the process, he just made Daemon even more powerful. And somebody says, just moments ago to Corlys, you announced your support for Daemon. And he starts to talk, but the king interjects. And I think he was going to say, like, I did not announce my support. I was just clarifying that the precedent has been set.
Right.
Although we can't know that for sure. And Viserys is furious about this and says, I will not sit here and suffer crows that come to feast on their corpses. Talking about his wife and son who had just died. And this was a reference to the fourth book of the A Song of Ice and Fire series, A Feast for Crows, which I thought was a nice little way of bringing that metaphor back into the story. And like you mentioned before, Otto Hightower is playing the game big time. He's kind of like a mix of Tywin and Lady Olenna, the Queen of Thorns. He's a hand like Tywin, and he's clearly, offering his daughter to the king like Tywin, but he seems to be like doing it slightly sneakily, which is Olenna style, sending her to his chambers in the middle of the night. It reminded me of the stories Olenna was telling Marjorie about how, I just went to the wrong room by accident, it's supplanting herself in front of her sister, and the way she was training Marjorie to get the job done, like regardless of the cost and everything. It was interesting to see a new person scheming in this matter.
Yeah, definitely. He wants to keep Viserys's injury, keep it quiet. He tells the Maester, keep it quiet.
Oh, yeah.
He sends his daughter in there to provide comfort to King Viserys.
And when he tells her that, there's like a flash of excitement that comes across her face, just very briefly, and then she controls it again. And so, like, referencing her conversation with Rhaenyra earlier, it's telling us that definitely Alicent has ambitions and will capitalize on this situation.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so then Alicent follows through and she goes to Viserys's chambers and she's consoling him, and she's brought him a history book because he's a history buff. And she relates to him instead of saying the things that people normally say. And, she describes how all she wanted when her mother died was just for somebody to say that they're sorry for what happened. So that's just what she does. And they seem to connect a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, they, that's a very kind gesture of her. She's sent there by her father, but, she seems like she's genuinely trying to, provide what little comfort she can. He's the king of, the seven kingdoms. So, she's just, the daughter of the hand. But of course, there's more at play than just her in the moment, going to him. But, she's trying to, I think, make a genuine, connection and try to, comfort the king and get his mind off of everything that's going on, and try to put his mind at ease a little bit, if nothing else.
Yeah, and in the context of the greater game, this is like the moment I feel like where she's stepped off the bench and she's entering the play, and it's going to be crazy to see what happens. This could have some...
Yeah, that's true, because, she's been Rhaenyra's friend, and, that's, a great place to be, friend of the, close friend and confidant of the princess, but, you're still basically, I agree, on the sidelines at that point. But then when you get thrust, into the game by your father, the hand of the king, you're definitely on the battlefield or playing field, maybe both.
Yeah, it's time to get off the bench, stretch, and get in the game. Take to the trenches, tactical offensive. We stay in relentless. These lames are defenseless. Yeah, so I mean, if this play works, there could be dramatic consequences. It would open up the possibility for a new heir, theoretically, if because he's in the market now potentially for a new queen. So, I mean, I'm
right. Viserys is probably in his 40s, maybe his 50s, but
I mean,
not that old, and
women run out of eggs. They get the empty egg carton after a while, but Walder Frey kept pumping them out into like
Walder Frey,
into like hundreds.
I forgot how many in the books. It may be even more than they talk about in the show.
Yeah,
Walder
he's
Frey, just has sons and sons and sons and daughters, just
He's the Genghis Khan
the
of Westeros. I think that
his DNA is everywhere.
Yeah, I think Genghis Khan's ancestors make up like 1% of all Asians or something like that, which is
some crazy stuff.
What do they say? life goals. Um, so yeah, up to this point, I've been watching, and I'm watching the dynamics between Rhaenyra and Daemon as they're both kind of like potential heirs. But at this point, it's like a third whole option is I was assuming until now that it was going to be Rhaenyra and Daemon like facing off in the dance for the throne. But this could open up whole new possibilities. So kind of exciting to see what's going to happen at this point. So next we move to Daemon celebrating the death of his nephew with the hookers and his boys.
Ooh, hardcore.
Yeah, pretty crass statement where he refers to poor Balon as the heir for a day. And instead of mourning the death, he seems to be celebrating his own ascension again, securing his position in the line of succession. So that's pretty hardcore.
Definitely. Allegedly, Otto Hightower says he corroborated it with 3 witnesses, and then Viserys questions Daemon, and he doesn't say he didn't do it, but he says, "Did you say it?" And then Daemon said, "We all grieve in our own way," or something to that effect.
Pretty much confirms it.
Yeah, I guess so. I thought he sort of left it ambiguous. But he definitely didn't say no. And if you didn't say it, you would say no. So I guess it sort of is a passive confirmation. But some people are like, oh, it's ambiguous. He didn't really say it. But I mean, it does seem like something Daemon would probably say. So. And
so then in that scene when Daemon shows up to the throne room, we get Viserys sitting at the throne holding black fire, which is so cool to see. Wicked exciting. And man, the shape of that blade, it's like tapered down to a point. That is a cool looking sword.
It doesn't have a normal sword that's, either straight or has a very slow taper, and then at the end comes to a point. I was trying to look at it closely. I want like a slow motion. Same as when Daemon drew Dark Sister when he was out there mugging people in King's Landing. I wanted like a slow motion, John Woo style.
Oh, John
so we could see
doves
all the detail.
All
Exactly, doves fly as he draws the sword, and see that Valerian steel, the rippling effect, sort of like Damascus steel looks like.
I saw a still frame, or maybe when I was rewatching it, I did see the Damascus. And to go with your to expound upon the shapes of swords, if you look at ice back here, it's unusual as it's such a wide sword and it stays wide all the way down until the very end when it just tapers within about, an inch to like 3 inches of the end. It's an unusually wide sword for the whole way. Blackfire has a narrow, straight taper, like an isosceles triangle.
Right, yeah, it's so one long triangle. Really cool design.
Yeah, really cool. So interestingly, I think it was Johnny Storr who brought this up to me when he enters the room. He's sitting there when Daemon enters. Viserys is sitting there with his sword out. And you may remember the encounter when Tyrion showed up from the wall to deliver to Bran the plans for a saddle so that he could ride even though he was crippled.
Right.
When he came in to greet Robb Stark, who was ruling Winterfell at this point, in Ned's stead, Robb Stark had his blade out. And he made it clear that, Tyrion made it clear that if the lord of the castle has his blade out, it's a signal that you're not welcome there. So this is like a well understood custom among the Westerosi highborn, and for Viserys to have his blade out like that when Daemon arrives, that signals a shift in their relationship right off the bat. So even before he tells him like that you're cut off, and kicks him out, we know that this is not going to go smoothly for Daemon. Just because
Daemon tries to, just play, be very informal, and then, Viserys goes straight into, "You will call me your grace, or not, or else."
I'll have the Kingsguard take your tongue out.
That's right. So he right there, Viserys, further shows Daemon how serious he is in the matter. That the threat of naked steel.
Yeah.
In the room right there in front of you, is clearly showing you that you're on very thin ice.
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 Very thin ice. Yeah, and oh my god, dude. Viserys is like, he put up with a lot of stuff from Daemon, but it seems like this crossed the line, and he's really hurt in his heart by this. You know, he said, my family has just been destroyed, and he freaks out. But instead of being by my side, or Rhaenyra's, you choose to celebrate your own rise, laughing with your whores and lick spittles.
Yeah, epic. Man, Paddy Considine just brings it.
Man.
And as I think something even George said is that on the page, you know, he just wrote Viserys as sort of a, not filler, but I mean, just another name, you know, in the line of succession of Targaryen kings, and didn't really, you know, pour that much depth into Viserys. But he was really pleasantly surprised with, you know, I mean, he obviously has to have a lot to do, especially at the beginning right here, with his family and Rhaenyra and Daemon.
Mhm.
But how much life and depth Paddy Considine is bringing to
Man.
Viserys, you know, bringing him to
Yeah,
life on
it's
the
good.
screen is really cool.
Really cool. So that was brutal. And, you know, he's like, why do you cut me so deeply? And he's like, I've only ever spoken the truth. And I see Otto Hightower for what he is. And these two are just at it with each other. Otto and Daemon, they have a terrible relationship. And now it's Viserys who is defending Otto to Daemon as opposed to vice versa as before. So he says, what, an unwavering and loyal hand? And Daemon pulls a Sandor Clegane.
Clegane, yep.
He calls him a cunt, you know, evoking the hound. And it reminded me earlier, too, just now thinking of this, when Rhaenyra and Alicent were in the Godswood, and Rhaenyra tears out the page, and Alicent's like, oh my God, what is the Septa gonna think? And she's like, fuck the Septa. And that reminded me
Don't
of
care.
the Hound also, to fuck the king. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
Drink
You know,
my wine.
The same kind of, you know, people, Tyrion may say that at some point to Joffrey or something like that, but people
Yeah,
get to
true.
a certain point with their attitude, you know, towards royalty or towards, you know, the Hand, you know, the Hand has incredible power, second, you know, only to the king. So,
Yeah.
I mean, even speaking, I mean, and that's not as treasonous as saying, you know, the queen who never was, or, you know, what
Yeah, that
Sandor
was brutal.
says at the end of the Battle of Blackwater is like, nope, I'm done with this. I'm gone. And, you know, then he finally expresses his true freedom of speech and
Right.
leaves King's Landing. So,
Yeah, and now
it-
just like that, Daemon is finally saying his freedom of speech too. He says, "You're weak, Viserys, and the Council of Leeches
Ooh.
knows it. They all prey on you for their own ends, and it's true.
brutal.
It's true.
Brutal.
Like Viserys is, you know, caught up with his own stuff. King's Landing is going crazy with crime. Like he's a weak leader, and like I mentioned before, it's symbolized by his festering wound caused from the chair, from the throne.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
epic. Are you about to jump into when Daemon starts to take that little half step forward?
Oh yeah, you want to talk about it? Go for it.
So he does that, and obviously the Kingsguard immediately, I think there's 4 of the 7 Kingsguard are standing right there. They immediately, you know, half draw their blades, you know, take a step towards Daemon to block him. And then when the camera goes back to King Viserys, his grip, I don't know if you noticed this,
No, I
it
don't.
only show up for half a second. His grip on the sword changed. So Viserys, so if this is the sword and he was sitting there, he was just, you know, Viserys was sitting there kind of with his grip, just a normal grip sitting there.
Did he
But after that,
switch it?
Viserys' grip
Oh,
had
no.
changed to like that, to
No
where if you,
way.
you know, like that, to
I
where
didn't-
if you would, if something it were to continue to escalate, Viserys would be ready just to stand up and start going to work. So
Yeah, it
go
reminds
back and
me-
look for that.
I will. I totally missed that. And it reminds me of the scene with Sir Barristan the Bold, you know, where he's
Yep.
like, even now I could cut through the 5 of you like butter. And that's a similar type of scene before he like spit on the on the throne and left.
Yeah, I think he
King's
took off
Landing.
his armor and took off his
Yeah, oh, yeah.
cloak.
Boom. Falls off.
And just dropped the mic and walked out of the throne room.
That's so cool. I only remember that like right at this instant.
Yeah, I was trying to think of Barristan Selmy's name yesterday. I was thinking about, you know, that scene and other Lord Commanders of the Kingsguard that we've seen. I was like, who is that guy? He went to Marine and he served Dany. And then those, you know, dang Sons of the Harpy, you know, ganged up on him and took him out in the end. But it took me a while to remember Barristan Selmy.
Yeah. Yeah. Great name too. And so right at this point, Daemon kind of leaves, and Viserys sits back in the throne and immediately cuts himself. He pricks himself on his left hand, and this is symbolizing the danger his rash decision has just put him in, and how he cannot possibly remain on top of this throne for much longer after this. That's my take on that.
Yeah, very, very dangerous seat.
Definitely. So then we're moving on to back to the scene with Valerian, the Black Dread's skull, and as they're talking and getting the history of everything, Viserys is telling Rhaenyra, he's apologizing to her and telling her that, like, based about Aegon's prophecy that of the long winter that would come, and he's saying that when this happens, a Targaryen has to be sitting on the throne, and like a Targaryen must be king or queen. And she's like, what? And so he apologizes to her for wasting the years since she was born, wanting a son, but now telling her that he believes in her and that he thinks that she could be a great ruling queen. And as this begins, we're getting the intercuts to the scene of the ceremony where the announcement becomes official. And we get all these different lords of Westeros pledging their fealty to Viserys and to his chosen heir, Rhaenyra. We get Corlys, Lord of the Tides, Master of Driftmark, and the Valerians are pretty badass. They have like their own fleet that's basically the size of King's Landing's fleet. They're the masters of the ocean, effectively, other than the Ironborn.
Yeah, they run the narrow sea.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in the books, the red wine, you know, in the Game of Thrones story, you know, another 172 years in the future, the red wines down in the they're right there by Old Town. I don't know if that's considered the Reach or Dorne. I mean, it's in the far south. I think Dorne sort of stops, you know, and there's a little bit of the Reach that kind of goes down to the coast. Anyway, the red wines are like, they're the ones with the big fleet at that point, you know, in Westerosi history, and they're trying to deal with the Ironborn, you know, off the west coast of Westeros, and then at the same time kind of police the stepstones and make sure that there's, you know, trade routes that are open around the narrow sea, around Dorne, the broken arm of Dorne, and up to King's Landing and further up to that northern town that sits on the narrow sea, where their sigil is like a Merlin. I'm trying to think of their name. Anyway, I'll look it up. But now, and back in this part of history, the Valerians are far and above the most prestigious naval house with the fleets.
Yeah, Corlys is the richest dude in Westeros at this point, whereas Tywin is later.
Yeah, he's made his epic voyages and has enriched himself greatly.
So Viserys is telling Rhaenyra, like, this is not a trivial gesture. The dragon's saddle is one thing, but the Iron Throne is the most dangerous seat in the realm. And we get Lord Hobart Hightower.
Yeah, I guess that's Otto's older brother. Lord of Old Town.
Yeah. And we get Bormund Baratheon, which is pretty cool. Rickon Stark, Lord of Winterfell. And, oh man, it's just wild. And I imagine that as all of this is happening, Princess Rhaenys, I'm wondering how she feels. Is she happy for Rhaenyra? Is she mad that this is showing that it could be done, but it didn't happen to her? What do you think? How do you think she's feeling about this?
You know, I think Rhaenys is probably excited, you know, for Rhaenyra. I mean, maybe with a little bit of, you know, regret or wishing that, you know, Jaehaerys had come to this same conclusion that Viserys did, instead of, you know, letting the lords of the Seven Kingdoms decide at the Great Council. But ultimately, it's, you know, she's witnessing, you know, potentially a breaking of at least the male wheel, you know, of the patriarchy, you know,
which
of Westeros.
Reminds me, that picture you sent me of the necklace that they put on her with all of the different
I did post that on the
sigils.
Game of Thrones, Game of Microphones Facebook page, by the way.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah. It has all these different house sigils of like the main houses and kind of patches all the way around it. And it surrounds her neck. And it reminded me of the way that Daenerys described the wheel, with each house being a spoke. And it's like she's got the
Yeah,
wheel
and it's
like,
round.
around
Wow,
her.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think about it, symbolizing the wheel.
Yeah.
White Harbor was that city I was trying to think of, and
Oh, all
House
right.
House Manderley.
Manderley, yeah, they play a big
remem-
role in the
uh,
books. Really cool.
Yeah, Wyman
role.
Manderley is this
Yeah.
huge
Mermaids.
obese guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, their sigil is like a merman in green on like a turquoise field, and he has a trident. So he's basically Aquaman with a tail.
Sick.
So that's basically the House Manderley sigil, more or less.
So tragically, Viserys here is making this decision proves the fears of Jaehaerys I valid. Jaehaerys spurned his daughter to keep the realm whole at great personal cost, in my opinion. And in this case, Viserys names his daughter heir, which sets the realm ablaze effectively and leads to the war that that Jaehaerys tried to avoid. Some things are just inevitable.
He just delayed it one generation. Instead of it happening about his succession, it happens about Viserys, succession. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah,
and it shows you like good rulers have to be selfless, and Jaehaerys was a good ruler according to pretty much everybody in Westeros. And he took himself out of the equation and thought about what the realm would need, and he named Viserys to be his heir. Whereas this is a personally driven decision, I feel like, by Viserys here. I mean, Daemon is a nutcase, so it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, he knows it's going to result in chaos, and he does it anyway. So next, let's talk about the Rhaenys Arya comparisons.
Nice.
On the way to the Red Keep to see Queen Aemma, we enter the Red Keep and pass through what eventually becomes the map room under Cersei, but no map is painted there yet. That's pretty cool. And so whereas, in Cersei's time in the Keep, this whole area is isolated and empty and nobody's there. Now, in contrast, the room is bustling and full of people. It's crazy to see the difference between these two things. And so Aemma is excited to see Rhaenyra, but she doesn't like her to be flying, and she smells the dragon on her. A couple times, two people smell the dragons, so the dragons must reek, to use a Game of Thrones word, reek. And
yeah, it's her two parents, Targaryens, that notice.
Oh yeah, that's true.
When she comes into the small council meeting, her dad Viserys is like, "On dragon back."
Probably both dragon riders. I'm just imagining what the dragon would smell like. And I had a few lizards growing up, and they have a very distinctive smell and that I remember quite clearly. And so I'm just imagining a lizard that's like 1,000,000 times bigger. You can smell it from a mile away.
Right. Yeah. Definitely would have a smell. I mean, if you smell like a horse after riding horseback, a dragon should be even more so probably.
Yeah. So Aemma says, I don't like you flying while I'm in this condition, implying she's in that condition frequently, which we find out is true later.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells her, like you mentioned, that you'll lie in this bed soon. This discomfort is how we serve the realm. In a very Arya-like moment, Rhaenyra says, I'd rather serve as a knight and ride to battle and glory. It's remindful of Arya telling Ned, that's not me, when he tells her that she'll grow up to wed a lord and and everything like that.
Yeah, Ned was trying to get her to be prim and proper, and she'd much rather have sword lessons with Syrio Forel. So definitely a lot of parallels between Arya and Rhaenyra.
Yep. And then at the small council meeting, Rhaenyra shows up and she's serving as the cupbearer, filling all the cups at the tables. Like Corlys covers up his glass.
It just hit me.
Like my mom covers up her glass when she's hanging out with my uncle because he's always filling up the wine constantly. Yeah, it just
bottomless.
Reminds you of the ghost of Harren Hall. Remember Arya when she's hanging out with Hot Pie after they first meet, and she's a prisoner at Harren Hall. She's the cupbearer. She ends up being, and she's kind of like hiding her face from Lord Tywin in case he might recognize her from Winterfell. Yep. So Arya and Rhaenyra as the cupbearer, which is kind of cool.
And she uses that. I think, obviously Rhaenyra is listening to these conversations in the small council, whether it's about the pirates and Triarchy and the Stepstones.
Right, just like Arya is listening in.
Yeah, whatever's going on with Daemon and the City Watch. And Arya is listening to what Tywin and his generals are talking about and discussing battle strategies against her brother Robb at the time. So they're parlaying their connection and insider position into, gleaning information that they might can pass on to somebody, on their side. So pretty cool.
Very sweet. Pretty smart. And so then we're moving on to Alicent and Rhaenyra in the Godswood, and we get a mention of Princess Nymeria, which evokes in my mind Arya's direwolf Nymeria.
Yep.
And so that was pretty cool. Little double entendre, and Rhaenyra ends up like reciting a whole thing about Nymeria, which is another Arya parallel because they're both obsessed with these female fighters, whether it's Visenya, the Conqueror's sister wife, or whether it's Nymeria, who led her Rhoynar across the narrow sea on 10,000 ships to flee the Valerian pursuers, and then burned them all to let them know that they're not running anymore. And interestingly, I noticed also Rhaenyra seems to be like more like Arya and cares much less about ruling and the game than Alicent does. But this is a trait that could actually make her a good leader. Like good leaders aren't looking for power, but they want what's right and what's just. And when they're put in power, they will act appropriately for the good of their nation or realm. And it kind of reminded me of George Washington.
Exactly, the reluctant leader.
Yeah, who had no desire to be president, but was effectively drafted by the entire Continental Congress, and who all unanimously named him to be president, and he never even like suggested it for himself. So that was cool. And yeah, and so that pretty much wraps up the Arya Rhaenyra similarities, but it brings us to Game of Thrones similarities. We get small council meetings, which are mindful of Game of Thrones. We get both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon starting off with a tourney, which is kind of cool. And that pretty much wraps up all my notes, actually. You got anything else you want to talk about?
Awesome. I noticed, two things as far as Viserys. Is he possibly like Dany, the unburnt? He when they're analyzing the second one is obvious, but the first one I didn't catch it till I rewatched it. When they're looking at his wound, and then the young maester says perhaps cauterization, and then the Grand Maester, just he like parrots the young guys like, oh yes, King Viserys, cauterization would be an excellent course of action. And then Viserys doesn't even ponder it or consider it. He's like, yeah. Okay, fine.
So okay, casual about it. Yeah.
So,
right. That's a great.
But I just thought about this. Would cauterization even work on an unburnt?
Huh.
He can be
like
cut.
Superman, right? Like,
right. Like
Superman
Dany,
can't be burned.
He can be stabbed and cut, but could you heal the unburnt's wound with cauterization?
Yeah. If you're unburnt, implying you can't be burned, then will cauterization even cauterize? Or well, is he now Viserys the uncauterized?
So that's an interesting thought experiment as far as that goes. And then at the end, before Rhaenyra gets down to, I'll just call them the crypts or the basement of the Red Keep, he's just has those candles and he's just kind of slowly moving his hand over the candles. And some people just have a high pain tolerance and they could do that for a little while.
Yeah, he's just
before they like have had enough. Or is he just
showing off? Bastard.
Can he just do that and it doesn't even affect him at all?
He should be a firefighter.
Like Dany. King Viserys, Lord Commander of the City Fire Brigade.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's those two quick things about, maybe those are little clues about Viserys possibly being, having that trait, which I thought for a long time watching the show that was just a Targaryen thing, that they all had that ability. But I think listening to y'all's show and hearing something that George said or something in an interview or something, he's like, no, that's Dany's a one-off.
Right. Yeah. He said it was a miracle
in that regard. So, it could be that a few other Targaryens also somehow possess that. It had to be a genetic, I would think, some kind of genetic predisposition for that. But that could be, a recessive gene that gets passed down through the Targaryen bloodline and only becomes active, in certain weird circumstances. But that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it didn't work for Egg, right? Didn't he burn at Summer Hall?
Yeah, I can't remember. That's the one missing piece of my Game of Thrones knowledge
at
is I
Summerhall.
haven't gone through the Dunk and Egg novellas.
Oh, man,
I need to do that. I got The World of Ice and Fire. I got that on Audible and listened to it. It's very interesting, but I haven't gone through Dunk and Egg yet. And
They're
I also didn't work for Viserys, Danny's brother Viserys. I think he's the third or fourth Viserys. When Khal Drogo gives Viserys his golden crown, Danny says he was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was pretty cool. One other note was just funny little moments. I had two when the City Watch is rounding up, all the miscreant and criminals. I'm pretty sure I listened to this for a couple of times when they pull the pants down of the accused rapist. And they show the guy's butt. I'm pretty sure he farts. Did you?
That would be a reference to Idiocracy, if that's true.
I could have swore I heard that. So, listeners, let us know what you heard, if you heard that or not.
I'll use the super headphones and check it out too.
But yeah, if Jon Snow said "go, go, go,"
yeah.
Sure, I listened to it. I thought I heard it, but it could have just been a weird happenstance where there was some other sound effect.
That's
but it sounded like a fart.
Now that you mentioned that, have you seen Idiocracy before?
And just a little bit in bits and pieces. I've never sat down and watched it straight through. I need to. It's
a Mike Judge movie. The premise is that humanity gets more stupid over the years as smart people breed less and lower IQ people decide to just have kids because they're not planning for their future in a chaotic way. How many kids do you have, Zach? And
4, yeah.
Just kidding.
Maybe I'm on that end of the spectrum.
But by the time it gets to 500 years in the future, humanity is so dumbed down that the number one movie in theaters is simply called Ass. And that's all it was, just one ass on screen for an hour and a half. And every once in a while it farts, that close-up of the ass is like just dead on for Idiocracy. And when Mike Judge was shooting that, he was expecting to have to go into the theater to film the crowd reacting to ass and be like, okay, you got to laugh and everything. But he went in there and he didn't even have to direct them. They automatically were just laughing at the ass on screen. And he was
that's funny.
Wow, this is terrifying.
maybe it's not as far in the future as we thought.
Yeah.
Another funny moment was at the tourney. Once it started people getting their face bashed in and stuff. This little squire or some little kid kind of over in the corner. I mean, he just loses his lunch everywhere. As the one guy gets his face just completely
ripped in half,
smashed in. And it's like,
that was so brutal.
It made me laugh. I don't know if that should be funny or not.
It's funny.
Just little kid losing his lunch when he realized how brutal. It's a tournament. It's all going to be fun, right?
Yeah. Wrong. Yeah. Went off the deep end pretty quick. Anything else you want to mention?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up our top 5. This week we went all weird because I had 8 things that kind of just all ended up as the whole episode just divided into 8 perfectly. So none of them are in any particular order. So we went 1 to 5 this week, but we'll go back to the normal 5 to 1 concept next week as we continue our coverage. All right. So that wraps up our top 5. We'll be right back. Stay with us. All right, we're back with news about Game of Thrones. From Deadline, House of the Dragon premiere on HBO draws nearly 10 million viewers. History was made at HBO with the debut of House of the Dragon. Game of Thrones prequel drew 9.986 million viewers across linear and HBO Max platforms in the U.S. Sunday, the largest audience for any new original series in the history of pay cable.
Wow. The premiere also marked the largest series launch on HBO Max across the U.S., Latin America, and EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, driving what HBO calls an unprecedented level of concurrent streams on the platform. Typically, Sunday night viewership for HBO series will represent just 20% to 40% of the show's total gross audience, according to the network.
The debut also topped Game of Thrones' 2011 premiere by almost 350% in terms of viewers. Not surprising, considering the audience has subsequently been established. Of course, there was no HBO Max back then, and streaming was a minor part of the TV industry. Also that. Another bit of trivia, Game of Thrones' 82-minute series finale in 2019 burned all HBO records with 19.3 million sets of googly eyeballs across linear viewing, which included the now extinct HBO Go and HBO Now.
The House of the Dragon premiere was also a hit on social media, where fans showed up to celebrate the return to Westeros. On premiere day, House of the Dragon was the longest trending topic on Twitter, ranking number 1 for 14 hours straight, and trended number 1 on Google Trends.
Nice. And in related news, I just saw that HBO and Warner Brothers have suffered a $3.5 billion loss. So hopefully that doesn't affect the production of this show, because we need them big budgets, if you know what I'm saying, for the dragons moving forward. And we mixed into the episode our Game of Thrones and history stuff with Damocles' sword and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln analogies. So we'll move right on to Raven's Calls. Shannon Jones says, I kind of really liked episode 1.
Anthony J. Alakine said, looking forward to your coverage of the show. Love the episode. Love the tie-in to Daenerys at the start and what came to be of Jon and Dany with the telling of Aegon's dream. Great actors, gruesome birth, great elements and dialogue that take us back to the original. Prince Daemon might be the one we hate to love in this show. I agree.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Matthew Rep, what's up, dude? He says, oh, geez, this is brutal. Game of Thrones pulling no punches right out of the gate. Where did all those extra swords go on the Iron Throne between here and the OG series? I'm imagining that Robert Baratheon removed them, although they were not present during the Mad King's reign in his vision. So we'll just chalk it up to they're just making improvements to the show as we go, and we'll imagine Game of Thrones with that one scene as having it.
Yeah, retcon it back in there.
Yeah, retcon, perfect. Yeah, until we have a better explanation. He also asks, has there ever been a Viserys that wasn't a dick? No. And he says, gotta love Lord Hightower as Hand. And that reminds me, it's the actor that plays Otto Hightower is Rhys Ifans. I did not even recognize this dude with the beard and everything. He was a great villain in the movie Hannibal Rising, which is like a Hannibal Lecter prequel showing his origins as a young child in World War II Lithuania and growing up without parents and without a sister. Rhys Ifans plays the main villain in that movie, which is really good. Matthew Rep continues, oh man, Valerian's skull is so majestic compared to what we saw before. Which, definitely true. And he says, Rickon Stark, kind of doughy. Winter hasn't come yet, so they're out of shape up there, I guess. And he loved seeing the Baratheon bros. And yeah, that was really cool too.
Very nice. I wonder what season. They didn't say that because I think in the first episode or maybe the second episode of Game of Thrones, you immediately know that it's already autumn. And Ned Stark says winter is coming, like 17 times in the first episode or two. But so I'm wondering here if right now, if the Seven Kingdoms are in a period of spring or summer or autumn, but they probably bring that in at some point.
Yeah, good question. Because they've had like an unprecedented long summer, right?
The heart tree or the weirwood tree in the Godswood still had leaves. But they I can't remember. That's a really deep dive. I can't remember if those trees keep their leaves all winter or not, since they're, this magical connection to, the earth.
What did the one with the three-eyed raven and up north, did that have leaves on it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if it showed it, if it was bare or if it had leaves. I think it had leaves. But anyway, like right when we get there, the whites rise up out of the frozen snow and start attacking Bran and company, so they didn't let us focus on that.
True, yeah.
That weirwood tree very long.
Zombie moment, Classic zombies.
Exactly. Richard Horsfield writes, "Hey Richard,
Hey.
what's up? Glad you're back with feedback.
Yeah.
It was a great start. I must say, I'm unsure if we're gonna have a love-hate for Daemon. Laugh out loud. I think he'll be a bit of a bastard, but
Maybe
by
just a
far, by far the most interesting character so far, I reckon.
Definitely.
Interesting cast as well. I didn't dig in before watching, so it was all completely new. Nice.
Same here.
I only now remember reading of Matt Smith, but I had forgotten. Oh, nice. So Matt Smith was a surprise when you saw him on screen as
He's a great
Daemon.
actor.
Very nice.
I've met him a couple times. Cool guy.
Excellent. Patty Constantine is an amazing actor, as is Rhys Ilfans, like Duncan was just speaking of. I was like, oh, I know these faces, LOL.
I'm not familiar with Paddy Constantine, but apparently he led in a kind of a cult hit in the UK that's really, really popular.
Okay, nice.
Richard was telling me about it. I'm going to have to check it out.
Nice.
Candace Volker says, I have been so excited for this. It was absolutely amazing from the cinematography to the score. It all adds such depth to the incredible acting. Very excited for the podcast to be back and eagerly await everyone else's thoughts. Thank you, Lady Candace. Great to hear from you.
Sarah Larkham. Hello, Lady Sarah. Welcome back. It was worth the wait. I love the premiere, and I am probably going to go start Game of Thrones again. Yes, another rewatch. And there is a callback to Tyrion's birth during the birth scene, but of course, in his case, Tyrion survived.
Right. I didn't catch that at all. Tyrion's mother also died in his birth, which is why Tywin hated him for the whole, of his life, unfortunately. All right. That's our show, episode 121. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Remember, don't get too close to those dragons.
Yeah. And a huge thank you to John Bailey, the epic voice guy from the Emmy-nominated Honest Trailers, for announcing our show. Dude has the best voice ever, right up there with James Earl Jones, in my opinion. And on another note, if you enjoy my take on things, you might be excited to learn that I'm working on a project of my own. It's a series in a novel, screenplay hybrid form that I'm already over 1,100 pages into writing. In the past year following a grand epiphany, I've been composing what amounts to a saga of Homeric proportions.
Nice.
Within a 15-minute period last May, in a moment of surreal clarity of vision, nearly a decade and a half of research into history and mysteries, both recent and ancient, megaliths and myths, pyramids and legends lost to time, suddenly coalesced within my mind, intertwining seamlessly into a single, cohesive narrative. Now I have a huge, epic tale in the works, one that's thousands of years in the making, an adventure that will captivate and enthrall the world. It's a story of bravery and perseverance in the face of total defeat, of moral character and American values, love, teamwork, and brotherhood, of exploration and secret passages and deciphered codes and transmissions, of the everlasting overarching battle between the forces of light and darkness. Just imagine the Da Vinci Code, Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, Stargate, Journey to the Center of the Earth, National Treasure, Project Blue Book, War of the Worlds, Splinter Cell, and Independence Day all combined into one post-World War II epic. A tale spanning from pole to pole, from World War II Egypt to Argentina, from DC to Greece, Mexico to the Brazilian forests, exploring pyramids and tombs, deep within the Earth's crust and through time, unraveling an ancient mystery, with rich lore spanning millennia and including fantastic elements of true history. The journey will please your eyes and work your mind as it challenges our collective understanding of history, physics, and the evolution of mankind. Solving the mystery of the pyramid's purpose, uncovering the occulted, discovering the history of humanity lost to the ages, deciphering the fates of the ancient gods, Egypt, lost civilizations, Tesla, Roswell, flood mythology, Hollow Earth, and the fall of the Third Reich. What is the truth at the core of it all? The Core Saga. Coming soon. I'll be releasing more on that in the near future. In the meantime, if you'd like to donate or subscribe to support us, you can go to paypal.me/GOM podcast or patreon.com/GOM podcast to donate an amount of your choosing. There are links to both at gameofmicrophones.com.
Doing some online shopping, and go on over to gameofmicrophones.com. Scroll down to the bottom and click on our link to Amazon. As an Amazon associate, we earn from qualifying purchases. Any contribution you make helps, and you can help secure the continued existence of Game of Microphones.
I don't think we've made any money on qualifying purchases yet, but a fella can dream. And make sure to check out Sirenicide, the serialized horror drama podcast featuring me and Archmaester Stitches, who we're looking forward to hopefully getting on this podcast throughout the season as well. And also check out his new show, which kind of expands upon Sirenicide and has individual bottle episodes of all kinds of cool little stories, some written by listeners, horror type stuff. It's really good. I've produced a couple episodes of that as well and voice acted on a couple as well.
Nice.
Go to Sirenicide.com, hearingthehaunted.com, and download it wherever you get your podcasts. Next episode, we'll be covering House of the Dragon, Episode 2. I don't think we have a title for that yet. Do you?
I haven't seen one.
Yeah, the title for the first episode wasn't added to IMDb until after it aired, so I'm not sure we have number 2 yet. But we'll find out eventually.
Yeah, in a really quick search, I don't see an episode title, so.
Oh well.
Find out on Sunday.
Yeah. Sounds good.
If you'd like to call, you can call us at 813-JOFFREY. Oh, I haven't had to say that name in a while. That's painful. That's 813-563-3739.
If you'd like to write in, you can email us at ravens@gameofmicrophones.com.
Make sure to join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GOM podcast. Each week, we'll be posting a feedback thread where you can leave your thoughts and comments on new episodes for us to read on the air.
Imp slap. You can also watch Game of Microphones on YouTube. Audio podcasts are great, but video is better. We're currently trying to build our minuscule subscriber count, so please go to youtube.com/gameofmicrophones and subscribe right now. Likes, comments, and shares are also appreciated.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, Gab, and Minds at GOM Podcast.
And we're on Tumblr too at Game of Microphones. All right, that's our show. Thanks for listening.
Why would I do that?
Because I'm your brother, and the blood of the dragon runs thick.
Then why do you cut me so deeply?
I've only ever spoken the truth. I see Otto Hightower for what he is.
An unwavering and loyal hand?
A cunt.
Here we